The story opens in the holy kingdom of Litties. It's a place with a thousand-year history protected by the goddess Eos. Under the king, the Night Order and the Magic Temple work together to guard the land. Inside the kingdom, the temple keeps monster threats at bay using the power of the saint. Through her prayers and holy power, she creates a protective barrier that covers the entire nation. Marastella thinks back on her life, noting that she used to be that very saint. But right now, the situation is completely different as she lies on her back, looking flushed and confused. Above her, a dark-haired beastman with animal ears looks down at her with a serious expression. He simply asks why this is happening. Marastella starts freaking out internally. She realizes she's currently being pinned down by a man, and she has no idea how it came to this. The scene shifts back to a few hours earlier inside the palace. A man in priestly robes points an accusing finger at Marastella. He calls her by name and delivers the news that she is officially exiled. This guy, Oswald, stands there with a smirk while a blonde woman clings to his arm. He tells Marastella that she needs to get out of the temple right this second. Marastella just stands there, completely stunned. She looks at them with wide eyes, unable to process what she just heard. She tries to get some clarification, looking frantically at Oswald. She asks him what he's talking about and questions why she's being suddenly kicked out of nowhere. Oswald doesn't back down at all. He declares that exile is exactly what it sounds like and tells her she's no longer needed in the country's temple. To top it off, he mentions that their engagement is obviously annulled, looking pretty happy about the whole thing. Oswald drops the news that starting today, a girl named Sarah is taking over as the new saint, and as his new fiancée. The blonde woman Sarah just smirks while Oswald tells Marastella to never set foot in the temple again. Marastella whispers in disbelief, completely blindsided. The entire hall erupts into whispers and murmurs as the crowd reacts to the sudden announcement. Suddenly, Mariastella's attendant, Lara, steps in front of her. She yells at them to wait, asking if they aren't being incredibly rude. Lara doesn't back down. She declares that Lady Marastella is the only true saint of the Holy Kingdom. She argues that the only reason monsters don't invade is because of the barrier Marastella creates with her prayers. She warns them that exiling Marastella could literally lead to the kingdom's destruction. She screams at Oswald, asking if he actually understands what he's doing, but Oswald just glares back with a dark look on his face. Marastella puts a hand on Lara's shoulder and tells her to stop. Lara tries to protest, saying it's absurd for a woman like that to be the saint, referring to Sarah. Marastella cuts her off gently. She reminds Lara that she's a talented attendant who achieved her position at a young age, so she shouldn't be raising her voice in a place like this. Lara tries to argue one last time, calling out to her mistress, but she doesn't notice that Oswald is already raising his hand behind them. Oswald simply tells them to be silent. Without hesitation, he blasts them with magic. Marastella immediately drops down and wraps her arms around Lara, shielding the girl with her own body as the attack crashes into them. The dust from the attack settles, revealing Marastella huddled on the floor, tightly gripping Lara to protect her. She's shaken, noting to herself just how tremendous the magical power of that blast was. Oswald stands over them, looking down with complete arrogance. He's known as the kingdom's genius magician, a talent seen only once in 1,000 years, and he knows it. He calls them unreasonable for trying to argue and tells them to take a good look at what he's about to show them. He whips out a document stamped with the official royal seal. He declares that this isn't just him talking, it's a direct royal order. Oswald stares them down with cold eyes. He tells them everything has already been decided by the crown. He warns them that since this is an order from the king, disobeying his words is now a capital offense punishable by death. With the crowd watching in silence, Oswald addresses her again. He makes sure to emphasize her new title, calling her the former saint. He lays it all out. He declares that Marastella is officially relieved of her duties as saint and is exiled from the temple effective immediately. And just to twist the knife, he shouts that his engagement to her is annulled at the same time. Oswald justifies the breakup with zero empathy. He claims he only got engaged to the saint of the kingdom, so since she lost the job, the engagement is void. He adds that nobody would ever choose a cheeky, unappealing woman like her if it wasn't for the title. He screams at her that she doesn't belong there anymore. He demands she get out of his sight immediately. Marastella stands there, tears in her eyes but refusing to completely break down. She turns to him and says she just wants to confirm one thing before she goes. She looks straight at him and points out that the new saint he brought, Sarah, doesn't actually have the power to create the protective barrier, does she? That hits a nerve. Oswald's expression snaps from arrogant to angry, and he growls back, asking what she just said. Marastella warns him that if she gets kicked out, the barrier protecting the country breaks down. She tells him point-blank that without the barrier, monsters are going to invade and attack the people, and she asks if he's really ready to take responsibility for that disaster. Oswald just laughs in her face, calling her warning a hilarious joke. He mocks her for thinking Sarah can't handle the barrier, claiming that for someone like Sarah, putting up a barrier is easy work and monsters won't be a threat at all. Sarah chimes in with a smug look, agreeing with Oswald. She accuses Marastella of making simple work look difficult just to seem important, claiming that anyone with a bit of holy power could have done what she did. Realizing there's no point in arguing with them, Marastella quietly accepts the situation. She simply tells them she understands. She keeps her composure and bows to the room. She thanks Oswald and everyone for everything up until now and wishes that the goddess's blessings remain with them. She turns to the staff and attendants who are watching in tears. She says a final goodbye to everyone. As she leaves, Marastella thinks back on her life. She was taken in by the temple when she was just 9 years old, and she's spent all her time since then praying and serving the goddess for the sake of the kingdom. She reflects on how the engagement between the saint and the first magician was just a formality decided a long time ago. She admits to herself that things never really worked out between her and Oswald anyway. She walks away while the maids cry out for her to wait. She thinks about how she dedicated her life to praying for the people, not to brag or show off, but because protecting the country was just what a saint was supposed to do. But as the heavy door slams shut behind her, she thinks about how she tried desperately every single day to do her best. Outside the main hall, Marastella breaks down. Tears stream down her face as she tries to validate herself, whispering that she really did work hard. She repeats it to herself, emphasizing that she's been doing her best this whole time. The weight of the situation hits her. She realizes she's leaving the place she's called home for 10 years, since she was a child, and she didn't even get to say a proper goodbye to the head priest who raised her or the other attendants. But she stops herself. She wipes her eyes forcefully, telling herself she can't be seen crying like this. She needs to keep it together. Suddenly, she hears footsteps nearby. Someone is walking through the grass and a voice calls out, asking if the saint has been found yet. Marastella quickly hides behind a pillar. 2 men are talking just around the corner. One of them reports that she wasn't in her room, but since her luggage is still there, they figure she has to still be somewhere inside the temple grounds. Marastella listens in, wondering if they're just looking for her to speed up her departure. But the vibe is wrong, something feels dangerous. Just then, Oswald's voice cuts through the air, aggressively asking his men if they've found her yet. Oswald walks into the hallway barking orders. He tells his subordinates to search quickly, guessing she either went back to her room or headed for the gate. He specifically commands them to find her and corner her in a spot where there are no witnesses. A dark grin spreads across Oswald's face as he clenches his fist. He drops the pretense completely and gives the order to get rid of her. Marastella, watching from the shadows, freezes in shock. She can barely process what she just heard. Oswald continues giving specific instructions to his hit squad, warning them not to use blades because the temple will detect even a single drop of blood. He adds that magic leaves traces too, so he tells them to just strangle her to death instead. Marastella stands there paralyzed while the reality of her situation sinks in. She isn't just being exiled, she realizes she's about to be murdered. Marastella is completely spiraling. She can't wrap her head around what she just heard. She has no idea what she did to deserve this. It's not just about getting kicked out of the temple anymore. She realizes they're actually trying to take her life. Fear takes over physically, and she starts shaking uncontrollably. She hugs herself, thinking that if she stays in this spot any longer, she's definitely going to be killed. She knows she has to run to a safe place, but panic is making it hard to think. Suddenly, she gasps as a memory surfaces in her mind, a voice calling out the name Luca and telling her there's something she needs to remember. The scene shifts to a flashback of a very young Marastella, addressed as Luca, lying in bed with her mother. Her mother tells her that if she's ever in trouble, she should go to the Forest of Spirits located behind the temple. She assures Luca that the forest will definitely help her because of who she is. Back in the present, Marastella recalls the rest of her mother's words, because you have the protection of the spirits. Even though she only knows about spirits from old legends, she latches onto this plan. She figures if she escapes through the forest, she can bypass the main gates, which is good because she suspects Oswald has men watching the exit. She tries to make her move, saying all right to hype herself up, but her body isn't cooperating. As soon as she tries to stand, her knees buckle from the fear, and she nearly collapses again, trembling. She forces herself to snap out of it. Calling herself by her childhood name, Luca, she demands that she get a grip because she refuses to die here. With a determined look in her eyes, she clenches her jaw and dashes off. She reaches her destination, the area behind the temple formerly known as the Forest of Spirits. It looks pretty grim. She thinks about how it used to be the home of spirits, but you hardly see them anymore. Instead, rumors say that at some point terrifying monsters moved in, making everyone afraid to go near it. She reaches out toward the thicket of thorns blocking the path. As her hand gets close, a high-pitched humming sound rings out. She realizes there's a super strong magical barrier stretched across the entrance. Marastella hesitates for a second, questioning the rumors. She wonders if the stories about the monsters are actually real. She figures that if dangerous beasts really lived there, she as the saint would have sensed them or heard their voices by now. Marastella decides she can't worry about anything else right now. She tells herself that more importantly, she just needs to focus on the immediate situation. She steels her resolve, telling herself to only move forward. Raising her hand toward the barrier, she commands it to respond to her power and orders it to open. The thorny vines actually obey her command and slide open. Marastella lets out a relieved sigh, thinking that she's actually surprisingly capable when she puts her mind to it. She steps past the barrier and walks deep into the woods. After walking for a while, she notes that nothing specific is happening to her yet. In fact, it's weirdly quiet. She realizes there aren't even any bugs or animals around. She recalls the head priest once telling her there was a spring somewhere in this forest. She figures if she heads deeper in, she might be able to find it and actually live there. She starts feeling pretty confident about her survival chances. Since she lived a rough, outdoor life during her childhood, she tells herself that camping out and foraging for food is no problem for her. She's ready for it. Suddenly, a heavy sound rustles through the trees behind her. Marastella freezes and turns around, wondering what that noise was. She looks up and spots a massive wolf looming over her. Her face goes pale as she stammers out that it's a magic beast, realizing the rumors were true, they really were in here. She doesn't waste a second. Marastella thrusts her hand forward and shouts for a barrier to deploy immediately. As the beast lunges, she thinks that if she can just repel the monster for even a split second with this spell, she might have a chance. The massive wolf brings its claws down right on top of Marastella. It happens so fast that Marastella just accepts it. She thinks, this is it, and fully believes she's dead. But a moment passes and she isn't dead. She winces and peeks one eye open, letting out a confused noise as she tries to figure out why she's still breathing. She looks up, but the wolf is gone. Instead, there's a guy with dark hair and wolf ears right in front of her face holding onto her. She just lets out a dumbfounded huh. Mariastella's brain is scrambling. She's wondering where that beast went and who this guy is. But the guy seems just as confused. He starts stammering, apologizing to her. He looks totally flustered and sweaty. He stammers out a wah and quickly tells her he's sorry and that he'll get off her immediately. Marastella doesn't even seem to hear the apology. She's just staring up at his face, thinking about how incredibly beautiful this guy is. There's a beat of awkward silence in the dark forest as they just look at each other. Then the guy notices his own hand. Marastella realizes in shock that he's the one who turned back into a human form. The guy lets out a surprised ah as he looks at his arm. Suddenly, the beastman completely loses it. He jumps back and frantically asks if she can actually see his form. Marastella is startled by his reaction and just answers that yes, she can. The beastman is totally freaking out now. He starts checking his own body, asking desperately if he's actually human and not a wolf anymore. Marastella, still pinned underneath him, confirms that yes, he's mostly human, though she awkwardly points out that his animal ears are definitely still there. He calms down a bit, a look of realization washing over him. He acknowledges that he's definitely not in his beast form right now. Marastella finally finds her voice and asks the obvious question. She wants to know who he is and if he's actually a human. The guy explains that technically yes, he is human, but he adds a heavy disclaimer. When night falls, he turns into a beast. Marastella asks why that happens. He looks away sadly and drops the heavy news. He has a curse placed on him that forces him to turn into a wolf. Marastella is shocked to hear about the curse. The guy agrees it's bad, but he's more confused by the fact that he's currently human at night, which isn't supposed to happen. He wonders aloud if the curse was broken for a moment. Suddenly, he gets right back in her face, asking if she's the one who broke his curse. Then he immediately pivots, deciding that before he asks questions, he needs to thank her properly. He's getting way too close and intense. But Marastella isn't listening to the gratitude. She's blushing hard and covering her eyes, stammering that before they do any talking, there's a bigger issue. She points out that he doesn't have any clothes on. The guy looks confused for a split second before looking down and realizing he is standing there completely naked. Moving on, Marastella lends him her cloak so he can cover up. He looks absolutely mortified. apologizing for showing her something so embarrassing, while she just awkwardly tells him not to worry about it. The Beastman, now covered up but still curious, asks about the magic she just used, wondering if it was a purification barrier. Marastella explains that yes, it's an anti-magic barrier, so she figures it must have reacted with his curse and weakened it temporarily. He nods, saying he understands the logic now, but his focus immediately drifts as he starts touching his own wolf ears, seemingly distracted by how fluffy they are. Moving on, he takes a closer look at her outfit. He asks if those clothes mean she's a shrine maiden from the Temple of Heavenly Light in the Holy Kingdom. Marastella visibly flinches at the question. She hesitates for a second before correcting him. She explains that she wasn't just a shrine maiden, she was actually the saint. The guy pauses, something clicking in his head. He mutters a quiet wait, as the implications of her past tense start to make sense to him. He points out that she said she was a saint, meaning she isn't one anymore. Marastella admits he's sharp for picking up on that. He explains that he used to work as a knight for the royal palace, so he knows how these titles work. Still, he's confused. He asks why a young girl like her is hanging around in a dangerous forest like this in the first place. Marastella drops the truth, she was exiled from the temple. She explains she had nowhere else to go, so she just ended up here. The Beastman looks completely shocked to hear she was exiled. He presses her, asking why she'd come to this specific forest just because she was exiled, and more importantly, where she plans to sleep tonight. When she calmly answers that she's planning to camp out, he completely loses it. He shouts that there's no way a young girl like her should be camping. Marastella, completely missing his concern, gets stuck on the young girl part. She awkwardly tries to tell him she's technically an adult woman, not a kid. The Beastman speaks up to get Maristella's attention while she looks back at him. He makes an offer, suggesting that if she's up for it, she should come stay at his house instead of sleeping outside. Marastella lets out a confused sound at the sudden invitation, but he keeps talking. He explains that he's genuinely worried about a woman trying to camp out in a place like this. He smiles gently and adds another reason. She's his benefactor because of the barrier help earlier, so he wants to return the favor. He presses a little more, telling her he can at least provide a roof to keep the wind and rain off her, and asks if she'll please accept his hospitality. Moving on, the scene shifts to a quiet cabin in the woods under the night sky. From inside, Marastella gives a quiet confirmation that she accepts. Inside the cabin, Marastella sits at the table and looks around the room. She thinks to herself that it's actually a really lovely house. The door creaks open and a silhouette steps in. The Beastman apologizes for keeping her waiting. He steps into the light wearing a fitted black outfit, apologizing for his unsightly appearance. Marastella doesn't seem to mind the outfit at all, she's just staring at him intently. In her head, she's absolutely loving the contrast, thinking that a handsome guy with dog ears is just too cute. Sitting at the table, the Beastman notices Marastella looking at him and guesses she's curious about his animal ears. Marastella quickly apologizes for staring so much, but he reassures her that he doesn't mind at all. Since the topic is open, Marastella gets straight to the point and asks him why exactly he looks like this. His ears twitch slightly as he explains the cause. He was cursed by someone. He breaks down how the curse works. During the day, he's stuck in this mixed form between human and wolf, but at night, he transforms completely into a giant wolf. He admits that people tried to help him. The country's shrine maidens and magicians did everything they could, but in the end, nobody was able to break the spell. Marastella tries to find a solution, asking if he knows who actually cursed him. She points out that for some curses, defeating the person who cast it is enough to break the magic. The Beastman's hand clenches into a tight fist on the table. He starts to say something about having an idea of who the culprit is, but he cuts himself off. He looks down and just apologizes. He claims that he doesn't know who did it. Marastella quietly accepts his answer, sensing the conversation is over. Watching him look away, Marastella can't help but suspect that there's something he's holding back or just can't bring himself to say. Seeing how much the Beastman is suffering, Marastella hesitates for a second, feeling bad for him. She decides to step up and asks him if he'd be all right with her trying to break the curse herself. The Beastman looks surprised and asks if she really means her. Marastella just gives him a simple, confirmed yes. She explains that while the barrier she made earlier thinned out the curse, it didn't actually fix it. She tells him that purification and curse breaking are kind of her specialty, so she thinks she can actually be useful here. The Beastman immediately shuts that down, telling her not to be stupid. He explains that even the best magicians in the entire country couldn't fix him. That failure is the whole reason he and this forest were sealed away in the first place. But Marastella doesn't back down, casually replying that there's no harm in just trying. He's still worried though, warning her that if she messes up, the curse could rebound and hurt her instead. Marastella cuts him off instantly, telling him she'll be perfectly fine. She looks at him with total focus and asks him to please just let her handle this. Marastella gets real for a second, admitting that if it came to a fight using attack magic, she'd probably lose to Oswald. But when it comes to using holy magic, she tells the beastman she's got serious confidence in her skills. She reaches out and gently takes the beastman's large, clawed hand into hers. A brilliant light bursts out as soon as they touch. Marastella tells him that this is the power she's used to protect the entire country for years. The light fades and Marastella speaks softly to the figure in front of her, telling him to go ahead and open his eyes. The beastman opens them and immediately stares at his own hands. They aren't claws anymore, they're human hands. He starts stammering, unable to believe what he's seeing. He looks up at Marastella, his face completely lit up. He exclaims that it's amazing and he's really back to normal, listing off that his ears, hands, and feet are all human again. Overcome with hype, he lunges forward and grabs Mariastella's hands, shouting about how amazing she is. Marastella lets out a startled yelp at the sudden contact. He completely loses his composure and starts spinning her around in a circle, cheering like a kid. Marastella tries to tell him to calm down at first, but she ends up just laughing along with him. After a moment, he realizes what he's doing and stops. He clears his throat, apologizing and admitting that he was just so happy he got a little carried away. He gets serious again, looking at her with intense gratitude. He calls her his benefactor and vows that he'll do absolutely anything for her sake. He asks her directly what she wants from him. He continues, insisting that anything is fine as long as it's something he can actually do. But right as he's making this heartfelt pledge, his fluffy wolf ears pop right back out on top of his head. Marastella awkwardly apologizes for ruining the mood, but she has to point out that his ears are back. The beastman touches his head and instantly freaks out. It turns out the fix wasn't permanent. Marastella explains that she didn't fully break the curse, she just thinned it out. She figures out that whenever his emotions get too high, the wolf features pop back out. The beastman looks defeated, realizing he has to keep his heart totally calm just to look human, and Marastella confirms that's pretty much the deal. Marastella tells the beastman to calm his nerves down. He listens and starts taking deep, exaggerated breaths to get a grip on himself. She looks down sadly and apologizes, admitting that she wasn't strong enough to fully break the curse for him. The beastman cuts in immediately, telling her that's absolutely not true. He looks at her warmly, reminding her that she is the one who managed to return him to his human form, and he thanks her for that. He gives her a genuine smile and tells her that he's just glad she was the one who was there. Marastella beams back at him, replying that she's happy if she could be of even a little help. Seeing her smile hits the beastman hard, and he just stares at her while his heart gives a loud thump. But that spike in emotion is fatal, his wolf ears pop right back out instantly. Marastella realizes the curse is still strong despite being thinned out, so she explains she'll need to apply the dispel magic periodically. She suggests doing it about once a day, and the beastman, panicking over his ears, just accepts the situation. Moving on, the beastman mentions it's late and tells her to use the guest room on the second floor. Marastella thanks him but then stumbles, awkwardly addressing him as Sir Knight since she doesn't know his name yet. Following the awkward pause, the beastman realizes he missed a step. He mentions that, come to think of it, he hasn't actually given her his name yet, and he apologizes for the oversight. Marastella assures him it's fine since she hasn't introduced herself either. He introduces himself simply as Luca. He explains that he's currently living a quiet life out here. Marastella offers a polite curtsy and introduces herself to him using the name Luchel. She adds that she'll be in his care for the night. Luca reaches out and gently takes her hand in his. He flashes a warm, charming smile and tells her it's nice to meet her. The scene shifts to the next morning. Marastella is slowly waking up, noting how surprisingly quiet it is. In her groggy state, she thinks it's weird that her maid Lara hasn't come to wake her up yet. Then it hits her. She sits up in the rustic wooden bed, looking around the unfamiliar attic room. She remembers that this isn't the temple anymore, she's been exiled. Her memory fully catches up with her. She thinks about the wolf and recalls that she ended up staying the night at Luca's house. She gets up and heads downstairs. Peeking over the railing, she spots him and calls out a cheerful good morning to Luca. Luca is standing at the stove with a pan sizzling in front of him. He looks back over his shoulder with a smile and wishes Luchel a good morning in return. While he's at the stove, Luca asks if she has any food dislikes. Marastella tells him she doesn't have any. He says that's good, so he tells her to take a seat and wait while he gets breakfast ready. Looking at the spread, Marastella notices fresh milk and eggs. It gets her thinking, Luca mentioned yesterday that he's basically stuck here and can't leave, so she wonders how he's actually managing to get supplies like this. They sit down at the table together. Before eating, they clasp their hands and offer a prayer to the goddess, giving thanks for the meal. Luca looks down with a faint, soft expression and mentions that it's been a long time since he actually had someone else here with him. Marastella starts eating and looks pretty happy with the food. Watching him eat, she realizes he must have been alone in this place for ages, probably missing human contact. She thinks to herself that if she were stuck living alone in a forest like this, she'd definitely feel lonely too. The quiet moment ends when Luca speaks up. He gets serious and asks her what she plans to do from now on. The question stops her cold. The spoon clatters in her hand as the reality sets in. She doesn't have an answer. She looks down at the table, looking totally lost. She honestly has no clue what she's supposed to do or where she can go. Seeing her reaction, Luca makes an offer. He tells her that if it's just for a few days, he doesn't mind if she stays here. He wants to repay her for helping him, but there seems to be a catch. He starts to add a condition. Picking up from his previous sentence, Marastella repeats the word but, waiting to hear the catch. Luca finishes his thought. He explains that he can't have her staying here for a long time. It would be trouble for him. He tells her she needs to leave this forest as soon as possible. He adds that once she decides where she wants to go, he'll personally walk her to the exit. Marastella looks down sadly, admitting to herself that she figured that's what he would say. She agrees with him, saying she understands. However, she hesitates for a second and throws in a but. She asks him straight up what's going to happen with his curse. She points out that if she leaves, he's just going to get consumed by that wolf curse all over again. She wants to know if there's anything she can do to prevent that. Luca shuts that line of thinking down immediately, telling her she doesn't need to worry about any of that. Marastella isn't convinced. She thinks about how much he's clearly suffering from this curse, remembering how happy he looked earlier just because he managed to turn back into a human. Besides, she knows how this works. No matter what kind of curse it is, in the end, it always eats away at a person's life. She looks across the table at him, asking herself if it's really okay to just leave him here all alone to deal with that. She makes up her mind. She looks him in the eye and tells him that, actually, she is still worried about him. She continues her thought, admitting that she was actually in a really tight spot yesterday. She tells him that while he keeps calling her his benefactor, as far as she's concerned, he is the one who saved her. She gets straight to the point about why she wants to stay. She brings up his curse and offers her help, telling him that if her power can do anything to soften the curse's effects, she wants him to use it. Suddenly, Luca reacts. He abruptly grabs her wrist, exclaiming about her hand. Marastella lets out a surprised sound at the sudden contact. Luca inspects her arm closely. He notices faint scratches running down her skin and realizes they look like she was swiped by something. He confirms it out loud. It's a claw mark. His expression darkens with guilt. He puts the pieces together, realizing that when he transformed into a wolf yesterday, he must have been the one who inflicted that wound on her. Marastella immediately tries to downplay it. She tells him it's really not a big wound at all and insists that it isn't his fault. To prove her point, she holds her arm out. With a bit of magic, the mark vanishes. She smiles brightly and tells him to look, showing him that she's perfectly fine. Luca stares at her, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and recognition. He quietly mutters the word again. Marastella catches the word and asks him what he means, but Luca turns his back to her. He dismisses it, saying it's nothing. He stiffly apologizes for startling her and for his rude behavior just now. He clenches his fist tightly at his side, tension radiating off him as he says her name, Luchel. Luca looks Luchel dead in the eye and tells her that just as he thought, she needs to leave. He insists she gets out of there as fast as possible. He admits that her power might be amazing, sure. But then he hits her with the reality of the situation. It didn't actually break his curse, did it? Dark thoughts race through his mind. He starts thinking about the worst-case scenario if something terrible happened again. The image of the claw mark flashes in his memory, terrifying him. Luchel tries to argue, suggesting that if she just performs a proper purification, it might help. But Luca cuts her off, refusing to listen and telling her the only answer is for her to leave quickly. He turns his back to her, completely shutting down the conversation. He tells her firmly not to come near him. Luchel heads outside to give him some space. She figures Luca doesn't want her by his side right now, and she feels bad just hanging around the house while he's upset, so she decides to go for a walk to clear her head. She wanders through the trees, looking around. Something about the forest catches her attention. She realizes that if there aren't any birds or bugs, she probably won't run into any wild animals either. She thinks about how this place used to be a holy forest, but now everyone says it's cursed and nothing can live here. She wonders if that's actually true, but then she spots something that proves the rumors wrong. She finds some gummy berries and then notices a whole patch of them nearby. She even finds edible mushrooms and gets excited about the discovery. She uses her dress as a makeshift basket to hold her haul. She's amazed, admitting to herself that she never thought she'd be able to gather this much food in a dead forest. Luca looks at her harvest and thinks that with this amount of berries she could actually make some jam. She gets an idea to borrow a pot from Luca's house to cook it, wondering hopefully if he'd be happy about the gesture. But then the memory of his cold rejection hits her, recalling how he turned his back and told her to hurry up and get out. Her excitement fades instantly. She realizes that asking to borrow a pot right now might be pretty difficult considering he just kicked her out. Her thoughts take a darker turn. She thinks that even though he told her to leave, she honestly doesn't know where to go. The only place she knows is the temple, but going back there isn't an option since Oswald is actively trying to kill her. She admits to herself that she doesn't know any safe place in this world. It's a lonely realization. She remembers that her mother, her only relative, died when she was just a child. With no father or siblings to rely on, she has absolutely no support system. The weight of her isolation settles in as she acknowledges that there is truly no one there for her. But then her thoughts drift back to the cabin. She whispers Luca's name. She realizes her hesitation isn't just about her own safety. She's worried about Luca too. Even though he told her not to mind his condition, she knows that curse eats away at a person's life force. She tells herself she can't just leave him alone to deal with that. Guilt washes over her as she thinks that if her holy magic had just been stronger, maybe she could have actually broken the curse for him. Suddenly, a splashing sound interrupts her thoughts. She perks up at the sound of water. She wonders if there's a stream nearby, then recalls Luca mentioning something about drawing water from a river. She follows the noise and steps into a clearing. Her eyes go wide and she lets out a soft wow as she finds a beautiful, sparkling river flowing through the forest. Luca stares out at the water, mesmerized by the view. She whispers that it's beautiful as the sound of the river fills the air. But then she notices something odd. It's not just sunlight reflecting off the water, there are actually small, glowing lights flying around in the air. Suddenly the lights seem to speak, calling out over here from one direction. Luca gasps in surprise and then hears the voice again from the other side guiding her. She starts chasing after the glowing orb, wondering if the voice really came from the light. She thinks there's no way that's possible, but at the same time she knows she definitely heard it. As she runs through the woods, panting for breath, she wonders if she's chasing a fairy. She remembers hearing stories about fairies living in this forest a long time ago, but she's still trying to process if it's actually real. She calls out for the light to wait, wondering where on earth it's taking her. Finally, the light stops hovering near a specific tree, and Luca slows down to take a look. She looks up at the tree growing out of the rocky slope and trails off as she recognizes it. Her eyes lock onto a dark, round object hanging from the branches. She identifies it immediately. It's the phantom fruit known as staria. Luca is completely floored. She knows that growing this fruit is incredibly difficult. The entire kingdom has been trying to cultivate it artificially without any success. Finding a wild one growing in a place like this is practically a miracle. She clenches her fist tight, her mind racing. She tells herself that's right, this is exactly the answer she was looking for. Luca recalls the lore about the fruit. It turns out if you eat a staria fruit, it raises your magic power from the absolute bottom up. She starts connecting the dots immediately. She figures if her magic power gets a boost, her curse-breaking abilities will get stronger too, and that means she might actually be able to save Luca. That settles it. She makes up her mind right then and there, stepping forward with total determination. Luca starts scaling the side of the cliff, grunting and straining as she hauls herself up the steep rock face toward the tree. It's a rough climb. She's clinging to the rocks, complaining to herself that this would be a whole lot easier if she just had some flying magic. But she knows she doesn't have anything convenient like that. She tells herself there's no other choice, she just has to muscle through and do her best. She actually makes it pretty high up, panting for air. She surprises herself, remembering she used to be good at climbing trees back in the day, so maybe she's got a hidden talent for rock climbing too. She's right next to the target now. She tells herself it's just a little bit further and stretches her hand out, sure she can reach the fruit. But just as she makes her move, the rock shelf under her gives way. Her eyes go wide as the ground crumbles and sends her plummeting down. She hits the ground hard, groaning in pain. But when she looks at her hand, she's actually holding it. She managed to grab the black fruit during the fall. Luca looks down at the black fruit in her hand, chuckling to herself. She's a bit battered from the fall, but she praises herself for actually pulling it off. Not a bad job at all. But then she imagines walking back into the house looking like a wreck, realizing Luca would probably freak out if he saw her covered in scratches and dirt. She decides to fix that immediately, using her magic to heal her injuries and dusting off her clothes so she looks presentable. Once she's cleaned up, she heads back inside. She opens the door and calls out cheerfully to Luca that she's back. Luca reacts instantly, jumping up from his seat the second he hears her voice. He calls out her name, clearly relieved she's finally home. He walks over to her, telling her she's really late and asking where exactly she went. Luchel apologizes for making him worry. She comes up with a quick cover story, explaining that she found some edible plants and just got completely absorbed in gathering them, losing track of time. She dumps a huge pile of regular fruits and mushrooms onto the table to prove her point. Luca is actually impressed, asking if she really found all of that herself. Luchel confirms she did, but then adds that something even better happened. She pulls out the real prize, the black staria fruit, and presents it with a beaming smile, announcing that she managed to find one. Luca stares at it, trying to place the name. He recalls that magicians prize this plant highly because the fruit is supposed to boost magic power. Luchel tells him he's spot on. She admits it was a bit of a struggle to get, glossing over the whole falling off a cliff part, but says she managed to secure it. She explains her plan clearly. If she eats this fruit, her magic power should get a significant boost. She tells him she's already memorized the location of the tree, so she plans to go back and farm more of them. She figures if she keeps eating these things, she'll finally have enough power to break his curse. Luchel smiles confidently, telling Luca that with the power boost from this fruit, she might be able to completely break his curse. Luca looks confused, asking why she would go to such lengths for a complete stranger. Luchel is taken aback by the question. She explains that it's the duty of those in the temple to help people who are in trouble. Luca counters that immediately, reminding her that she isn't actually a person of the temple anymore. Luchel pauses, admitting that he's actually right about that. But then she softens her expression, telling him that seeing him in pain just made her want to do something about it if she could. Luca stares at her for a moment, just quietly accepting her answer. But then his demeanor changes as he notices something. He asks Luchel what on earth happened to her clothes. Luchel blinks, completely confused by the sudden subject change. Luca points specifically to the back of her outfit, looking concerned. Luchel freezes, realizing she messed up big time. She internally panics, realizing that while she remembered to heal her physical wounds, she was so focused on that part that she completely forgot to check her clothes for damage. Luca puts the pieces together instantly. He notes that she said she struggled to get the fruit, points out the bloodstain on her hem, and deduces that she must have gotten injured and used magic to cover it up. Luchel realizes she's busted. She thinks to herself that despite all her effort to check herself at the door, he still caught her. She awkwardly tries to downplay it, admitting there was just a tiny bit of trouble. Luca looks stressed out, telling her she really doesn't need to go this far for him. He asks what he's supposed to do if she ends up in danger just for his sake. But Luchel dismisses his worry, telling him flat out that this isn't just for his sake. She says his name to get his attention, telling him she actually has a request. Luchel looks him in the eye and drops the big question. She wants him to let her stay here with him. She starts being completely honest about her situation. She admits she actually has nowhere else to go, no relatives, and no home to return to. She tells him that if he orders her to leave, she'll go, but she's basically out of options. She takes his hand, trying to bargain with him. She says that even if it's only while her purification powers are useful for his curse, she just wants him to let her stay. Holding his hands, she tells him that as long as she has her power, he won't have to suffer through this alone anymore. Luca hesitates, warning her that his curse is dangerous and might end up hurting her. Luchel shuts that down instantly, saying that simply won't happen. Luca looks shocked by her confidence, asking how she can possibly say that with such certainty. Luchel thinks to herself that she can't exactly reveal the truth, that the reason she's so sure is because she used to be the saint. Instead of revealing her identity, she smiles and simply tells him that she'll eat that staria fruit to become even stronger, implying that's how she'll stay safe. Luchel looks him dead in the eye, hands clasped, and promises him that she is definitely going to save him. She grabs Luca's hands tight, telling him firmly that she won't let him be alone anymore. Luca just lets out a surprised breath, caught off guard by her intensity. Right then, a light glows around them. Luca realizes what she's doing and asks if this is the purification for today's curse. Luchel beams at him, sparkles practically flying off her. She claims she just took a bite of that staria fruit she mentioned earlier, asking him if he can tell her purification power got a little stronger because of it. Luca looks away, kind of skeptical, admitting that honestly he doubts it's visibly stronger just from that. But Luchel puffs up proudly, insisting she's going to declare it anyway because the mindset is what counts. Luca turns his back to her, goes silent for a second, and then finally tells her he understands. Luchel perks up, surprised. He looks back over his shoulder with a genuine, gentle smile. He tells her that if that's the case, she can stay here until she's satisfied. Luchel stares at him, completely stunned that he actually agreed, stammering a little. She starts giggling to herself. Luca looks confused and asks why she's laughing, but she just waves it off and says it's nothing. But in her head, she's thinking about the real reason. She's just incredibly relieved that he finally smiled for her. She decides to keep that part a secret, though. Back in the forest, the mood is totally different. Luchel, looking genuinely touched, thanks Luca from the bottom of her heart, but Luca just smiles softly and tells her that's actually his line. He continues, sincerely thanking her for doing absolutely everything she could just for his sake. Meanwhile, back at the palace, things are getting ugly. Oswald is sitting alone, seething with rage. He's furious that even though he gave specific orders to get rid of Marastella quickly, it hasn't been handled to his satisfaction. He grinds his teeth, looking like he's about to snap, and curses the sheer incompetence of everyone around him. Just then, a subordinate comes rushing into the room, completely out of breath. He drops to a knee and calls out to Lord Oswald, saying he has an urgent report. Oswald, already on edge, snaps at the guy and demands to know what it is. The messenger looks terrified and starts stammering. He mentions Saint Sarah's barrier, but he's hesitating to finish the sentence. Oswald has zero patience for this. He yells at the man, demanding to know what happened to the barrier and telling him to spit it out clearly. The subordinate finally drops the bomb. He reports that the barrier is fraying and coming apart. Oswald freezes, looking like he just got slapped in the face with the news. Shock turns to denial instantly. Oswald stammers, asking what the hell the guy just said, refusing to believe his ears. He completely loses it. Screaming that there's no way that's possible, Oswald violently sweeps everything off the table, crashing objects to the floor while yelling at his subordinate for bringing him such a ridiculous report. The story rewinds a bit to give some context. We're looking at the temple a few days before the current events. This takes place right after St. Luchel was kicked out of the temple by Oswald. Sarah immediately settled in as the new saint, but she wasn't exactly humble about it. As soon as she arrived at the temple, she started barking orders at the shrine maidens. She told them that since she's a noble, it's completely inappropriate for commoners to serve her. Then she dropped the hammer and told anyone who had served the previous saint to just get out. One of the shrine maidens, Nina, watches this display with pure disgust. She's thinking about what a stuck-up, high-end, mighty noble woman Sarah is. It really ticks Nina off. But then she closes her eyes and thinks about it. Considering Sarah is that jerk Oswald's girlfriend, this kind of trashy behavior actually makes perfect sense. The other maidens are frustrated too. One complains that because Sarah won't let them work, they have absolutely nothing to do. Another sighs, wishing Luchel would come back. They just go through the motions of morning prayers while grumbling to each other. Since they're banned from working, the maidens turn the temple into a playground. They start playing tag, hide-and-seek, and even hold a contest to see who can do the best impression of Sarah. Meanwhile, Sarah just sits around complaining that the tea is cheap and doesn't suit her sophisticated tastes. This nonsense goes on for several days. Cutting to the present, Nina is walking down the hall looking nervous. The head priest summoned her, and she's sweating bullets, wondering if she took the jokes and games a little too far. A fellow maiden walking with her speaks up. She calls out Nina's name and asks if she's heard the rumors about just how incompetent the new Saint Sarah actually is. Lara, a shrine maiden with a short bob cut, is smirking as she walks down the hall. Her friend Nina is giving her a hard time, accusing her of skipping morning prayers again. Nina warns her that if she keeps running her mouth like that and Oswald hears her, she's literally going to get herself killed. Ignoring the warning, Lara points toward a window and tells Nina to take a look. Nina huffs, claiming she can't hear anything from there, but she looks anyway. Through the window, they spot Oswald outside and he looks absolutely miserable. Lara notes that he's in a terrible mood again today, mentioning that he's been snapping at everyone and taking his anger out on the staff for a while now. As they keep walking, Lara drops the truth bomb. The reason he's so mad is that Sarah, the new saint he brought in, is turning out to be shockingly useless. Nina agrees, saying it's only natural someone in his position would be irritated by that kind of failure. Nina thinks about it and wonders when Oswald became the type to wait around for a woman like Sarah anyway. She points out that until recently, he was constantly obsessing over Lady Luchel. Lara laughs and asks if Nina remembers the time Oswald actually tried to barge in on Luchel while she was taking a bath. She cracks up, remembering the look of pure embarrassment on his face when the maids chased him out, calling it an absolute masterpiece. They share a giggle about Oswald's past humiliation, but then Nina's expression gets serious. She asks Lara if she's heard the latest rumor going around. The atmosphere gets heavy as Nina whispers it. The rumor that Sarah's protective barrier is actually imperfect. Lara's smile fades. She quietly confirms that she's heard it too. In fact, she suspects that this failing barrier is exactly why the head priest has suddenly summoned her to his office. They arrive at the heavy double doors of the head priest's chamber. Lara steps forward to go in alone and Nina stays back, quietly wishing her friend good luck. Lara pauses outside the door, letting out a heavy sigh as the sweat rolls down her face. She thinks to herself that she has a massive, terrible feeling about this meeting. Bracing herself, she pushes the heavy door open. Inside, the head priest, an older man with a long beard and ceremonial hat, looks up and welcomes her in. He doesn't waste any time with small talk. As she stands before his desk, he tells her bluntly that he called her here to discuss Lady Sarah. The priest drops the bad news. He reveals that yesterday, Sarah's barrier actually failed. It wasn't just a small glitch either. Monsters invaded Shisura, the biggest village on the border, and the situation got so bad that the Night Order had to be secretly dispatched to fight them off. Lara listens with a disgusted look on her face, thinking back to how arrogant Sarah was. She remembers Sarah bragging about having the Saint's power, but now she thinks it's pathetic that Sarah chased Lady Luchel out only to end up in a mess like this. The priest clears his throat to get her attention again, moving the conversation forward. He explains that tomorrow morning, there's going to be an official report to the king about this disaster. Then he drops the bomb on her. She has to be the one to accompany Sarah to the palace. Lara's face goes completely blank with shock, her mouth hanging open as she tries to process what he just said. She completely loses it, screaming at him and asking why she has to do it. The priest stays calm though, simply explaining that for important reports like this, it's the custom for the head shrine maiden to go with the saint. Lara immediately pushes back, yelling that it's impossible. She reminds the head priest that he knows exactly what Lady Sarah said to her, insulting her and claiming a commoner shrine maiden isn't worthy to walk with her. The head priest cuts her off before she can spiral, simply telling her not to talk like that. He looks exhausted as he admits the real reason he needs her. He tells her plainly that he wants an ally in the royal presence, and having someone smart like her by his side would save him. Lara stops arguing, looking at him with surprise as his words sink in. She thinks it over, remembering that the head priest is the one who looked after her back when she was just a lonely orphan. She tells herself that even though she hates Sarah, if the priest is asking for backup, she wants to help him. There's another reason too. She realizes that right now, nobody knows where Lady Luchel went and there's absolutely no information on her. She clenches her fist, figuring that if she goes to the palace for this official report, she might actually catch wind of some news about Luchel. Having made up her mind, she finally tells the priest she understands and agrees to go. Later, the group arrives at the royal palace. The head priest leads the way into the massive throne room, with Sarah walking ahead and Lara following close behind. Lara sneaks a glance at the king sitting on the throne. It's her first time seeing him this close, and she's surprised by how young he looks, realizing it's only been a few years since he took the throne. A knight steps forward to deliver the grim news. He reports that the country's barrier has officially unraveled, and monsters are already wrecking the border villages, causing massive damage despite the local units trying to fight back. The head knight, a man named Gaza, steps forward to address the situation. He knows he has to be blunt here, telling the room that regardless of the reasons, they absolutely have to do something about the failing barrier right now. Oswald stands there looking visibly annoyed by the report. He dismisses the news completely, claiming that the barrier falling apart is just some kind of mistake because, in his mind, Sarah is perfectly capable of wielding both holy power and magic. Gaza doesn't back down though. He stands his ground in the throne room and hits Oswald with the cold, hard facts. The barrier is gone, plain and simple. He adds that towns are already screaming for help and he's had to dispatch knights to handle the mess. Oswald's expression turns dangerous. He glares at the knight, demanding to know how Gaza intends to justify what he's saying. He completely loses his temper, shouting at his own head knight. He demands to know what Gaza is talking about and accuses him of trying to make a fool out of his fiancée. Seeing that Oswald isn't listening to reason, Gaza turns desperately to Sarah. He calls out to her, pleading with the saint to say something to confirm the reality of the situation. Sarah starts trembling, looking completely fragile. She stammers Gaza's name and whispers that the barrier disappearing can't be true, flat-out denying reality, while the head priest and Lara watch from the sidelines. She breaks down into tears, acting the victim. Between sobs, she insists it has to be a mistake because she's been working so hard at her duties every single day. The head priest steps in, cutting through the drama with a calm but firm voice. He tells her that regardless of her claims, the reality remains that the barrier has vanished. Sarah looks cornered, sweat running down her face. She stammers helplessly, crying out that she's doing her absolute best just for Oswald's sake, trying to make it about her effort rather than the disastrous results. Sarah immediately starts making excuses. She grabs her head and stumbles, claiming she's been feeling sick for the last few days. She insists that if something happened to the barrier, her poor health is definitely the reason why, while Oswald rushes over to catch her. Oswald immediately pivots to attacking everyone else. He yells at the room for not caring about Sarah's condition and tries to pin the blame on the temple, shouting that the barrier failure is due to their incompetence. He demands that the other high magic users in the room gather up and fix it themselves. The head priest keeps his cool, though. He explains to Oswald that barrier magic isn't the same as normal magic. He clarifies that it's a specific skill that only becomes usable by a saint with high holy power after years of training, so just rounding up random mages won't work. Oswald isn't hearing it. He glares at the old man and demands that if that's the case, they should just find people with at least some holy power to act as batteries and assist Sarah. The head priest shuts that idea down too. He calmly tells Lord Oswald that even among magic users, people with holy power are incredibly rare. It's basically a gift from the heavens. He admits that with the temple's current resources, finding someone like that is next to impossible. Then he throws the ball back in Oswald's court. He tells him that if the Magic Bureau thinks they can find someone with the holy aptitude to help Sarah, they are certainly welcome to try. The tension is cut short when the king speaks up from the throne. He calls out Oswald's name firmly, demanding his attention. The king ignores the drama and asks for a status report on the Magic Bureau's subjugation squad. A messenger reports that the 5th squad headed out, but the king cuts to the chase and asks if the job is actually done. The answer is a hard no. The messenger reports that while they've managed to evacuate villagers from the frontier, the threat hasn't been neutralized yet. The king puts the pieces together, pointing out the bottom line. The Magic Bureau hasn't been able to stop the monsters. Oswald breaks into a sweat, realizing his department is failing on all fronts. The king isn't buying the excuses. He looks down from the throne and notes that Saint Sarah seems to be in poor health, but he doesn't offer sympathy. Instead, he reminds her of her own claims that maintaining the barrier is easy if her condition is perfect. He orders her to prove those words by recovering immediately and getting back to her duties. Then the king drops the hammer. He states clearly that if she can't do it, he'll be forced to consider other options. Oswald flinches, looking completely humiliated and stressed by the direct threat. Oswald has no choice but to bow and accept the order, sweating profusely as he responds. Behind him, Sarah looks terrified, realizing the safety net is gone. The atmosphere in the room shifts. The king's words about considering other options hang in the air. It's clear to everyone what that means. Someone is going to take the fall for this failure, and that someone is Oswald and Sarah. Nina, the shrine maiden, watches from the side with a sharp look. She focuses on Oswald, thinking to herself that since he's endangered the entire country, he's not going to get away with just a slap on the wrist. The king speaks up again, silencing the room. Just as a precaution, he gives a new command, call Luca back. The reaction is instant. Oswald and Sarah both freeze, their faces twisting in shock. The idea of bringing back the woman they exiled clearly terrifies them. Oswald tries to talk his way out of it, panic seeping into his voice. He asks if having a backup for Sarah is really necessary, trying to question the king's judgment. But the order stands firm. Luca is to be summoned immediately, and they're told to use a messenger hawk to save time. Nina decides to speak up. She steps forward and addresses the elephant in the room. She mentions the rumors that the saint abandoned the country and asks the hard question. Considering the situation and how she was treated, would Lady Luca even agree to come back? Oswald immediately snaps. He turns on Nina, yelling at her for interrupting when she's just a lowly shrine maiden. He shouts that it doesn't matter what Luca wants. Her personal feelings about returning are completely irrelevant to him. Oswald immediately switches into damage control mode. He assures the king that the entire Magic Bureau will unite to hunt Luca down. He then reveals his true colors, explaining that once they drag her back, they can just throw her into confinement so she can never escape again. The king rests his chin on his hand, humming in thought. He agrees with Oswald's grim plan while Sarah watches from the side, looking completely rattled. Oswald turns his attention to the rest of the room, specifically the temple staff. He warns them that this applies to everyone. If anyone tries to hide Luca's whereabouts, it will be considered an act of treason against the king himself. He glares at them with a twisted expression, making sure the head priest and everyone else understands the stakes. He demands that if they find out where that woman is, they report it to him immediately, shouting to drive the point home. Nina clutches her chest, looking horrified. She realizes the cruel reality of the situation. Even if Lady Luchil returns to save them, she's just walking straight into a prison cell. Meanwhile, far away from the toxic politics of the castle, Luchil is living her best life. She drops a heavy basket of fresh produce onto a table, wiping sweat from her brow. She beams with happiness, noting that today's harvest was another big success. She does a little stretch, looking pleased with her new look. She mentions that since her saint uniform got torn up, Luca lent her some of his clothes. They're a bit baggy on her, but she admits they're actually super easy to move in, which helps her get a lot more gathering done in the forest. She opens her hand to reveal some small black seeds. She explains that she saved them from the staria fruit she found the other day. Luchil decides she wants to plant them in the garden before the sun sets, though she knows there's a chance they might not grow. As she heads through the house, she looks around and wonders where Luca wandered off to. She stops in the hallway. She spots Luca's room and notices that the door has been left wide open. Luchil knocks on a door inside the house and peeks her head in, calling out to see if Luca is in his room. He isn't there, but something on the wall catches her attention, a sword displayed prominently in the empty room. She takes a closer look and realizes the crest on the hilt belongs to the Rabble royal family. She remembers hearing that Luca used to be a knight for them, but this isn't just standard issue. She knows that particular crest is the official formal seal, meaning unless someone is a super high-ranking noble with direct ties to royalty, they wouldn't be allowed to own something like that. She starts putting the pieces together, wondering if Luca was actually a high-ranking noble back in the day. Or, she figures, maybe he just received the sword as some kind of special reward for his service. Suddenly, she snaps out of it. She realizes she's snooping and scolds herself, thinking it's rude to pry into his past like this. She decides she definitely shouldn't be staring at his personal belongings without permission. She excuses herself from the empty room and heads outside. As she steps out, she spots Luca in the yard. He's swinging a wooden practice sword with serious intensity. Luca stops mid-swing and turns around, sweating from the workout. He notices her and asks if she's back already, and Luchil confirms she just returned. Watching him, Luchil compliments his sword form, saying it looks beautiful. Luca brushes off the praise, admitting he's actually pretty rusty since it's been such a long time since he's been able to hold a blade. Luchil seems surprised to hear that. Luca explains with a bit of a laugh that until Luchil showed up, he literally couldn't hold a sword because his hands were stuck as giant wolf paws. Luchil realizes he has a point. It's hard to grip a hilt without thumbs. He flashes her a genuine, charming smile, and tells her directly that it's all thanks to her that he can practice his swordsmanship again. Luchil is caught off guard by his sincerity and feels her heart skip a beat, blushing at the sudden praise. Luchil is still reeling from Luca's smile, feeling her heart pound. She realizes she's never felt this way about a man before, mainly because the temple was full of nothing but grandpas, so she never had the chance. Luca interrupts her thoughts, asking what she brought with her. She shows him the items in her hand, explaining they are staria seeds she thought about planting in the garden. Luca asks if they'll actually grow, and Luchil admits she's never heard of anyone successfully farming them before. But she's feeling optimistic, telling him that if it happens to work out, it would be pretty interesting. That's why she wanted to get his permission before sowing them. Luca laughs and tells her she doesn't need to ask for permission, she can do whatever she likes around there. Luchil gets excited and says she'll go plant them right away. She heads out into the yard, picks a spot, and decides that's where she'll start digging. Luca watches her work and asks if she's sure about planting it so far on the edge of the property. Luchil explains that staria plants eventually turn into trees, so she figures it's smarter to keep them a good distance away from the house. Once the seeds are in, she clasps her hands together and starts praying, wondering if giving them a little blessing might help them grow. Suddenly, a strange light begins to glow around the spot. Luca notices it immediately and asks what the light is, while Luchil focuses her prayer on making the seeds thrive. Luca gasps in shock, pointing at the ground and telling Luchil to look at what's happening. While Luchil is still mid-prayer, the seedling instantly shoots up out of the dirt with a little pop, growing way faster than nature intended. The seedling shoots up like crazy, making loud growing sounds as it expands. Luchil watches it happen, completely impressed, saying it's amazing and wondering what exactly is going on. It doesn't stop until it's massive. Luchil yells out that it's amazing, then calls down to Luca, asking if he saw that. The little sprout just turned into a full-sized tree in seconds. She's somehow already climbed up into the branches. She tells Luca that if she raised this with her own power, she's pretty sure she just became the first person in history to successfully farm staria. Luca, standing on the ground, yells that now really isn't the time for a history lesson. He tells her to get down immediately, adding that he's worried she might be stuck up there. Luca warns her that if she falls from that height, she's going to get hurt. Luchil brushes him off, insisting she's fine. She tells him she's actually really good at tree climbing. Luca yells at her to watch out, but she just laughs, telling him he worries way too much. She starts telling him a story about how when she was a kid, people used to call her Monkey Chill because she climbed so much. But before she can finish the sentence, the branch under her feet snaps. Luca shouts that it's dangerous as gravity takes over and she starts falling. But she doesn't hit the ground. Luchil blinks her eyes open, realizing she's been caught. She looks up to see Luca holding her and he immediately asks if she's all right. Luca looks pretty stressed out, telling her that asking if everyone is okay is his line, not hers. He asks again if she's hurt. Luchil blushes, thinking about how gentle he is and feeling grateful that he saved her. But then things get awkward. Luchil stammers that her chest feels a little tight. Luca says huh, and looks down, realizing that in his panic to catch her, his hand landed right on her chest. Luca completely loses it, yelling in shock and jumping back while stuttering out a massive apology. Luchil tries to play it cool, smiling awkwardly and telling him no, she's just grateful he saved her, but the vibe is definitely weird now. Following the accidental grab, things are still awkward. Luca, face completely red, asks what she's looking at. Luchil simply points out that his ears are doing something, and just like that pop, his wolf ears spring out fully. Luchil looks amused and teases him, asking if his heart is racing, while Luca freezes up in shock. Luca covers his face with his hand, trying to hide how flustered he is. He starts to say something, then insists that this isn't his fault at all. It's actually her fault this is happening. Luchil giggles and apologizes, but as she watches him turn away, she admits to herself that his reaction is actually pretty cute. Luca starts walking away, but his legs look heavy, like the transformation is trying to take hold. Luchil notices the change in his movement and asks if the purification effect has worn off. Looking at the sky, they realize the sun is setting. Night is coming fast. Luchil tells him there's nothing to worry about. She explains that even if the effect wears off, she can just perform the purification again as many times as it takes. Luca still looks unsure. He wonders out loud if the magic will really hold until morning, quickly clarifying that he's not doubting her skills. Luchil reassures him it's fine, she just needs to cast the magic one more time before night fully sets in, since that's when the curse is strongest. But Luca is imagining the worst-case scenario, his giant wolf form looming over her. He asks her seriously what happens if he transforms back into a wolf while she's asleep and ends up hurting her. Luchil just smiles at him gently. She tells him to stop making such a worried face, promising him that everything is going to be okay. Later that night, Luca is sitting on his bed alone in the dark. He's replaying the conversation in his head, telling himself that yeah, that's right, thinking back to what Luchil told him earlier about being able to handle the curse. But there's a problem. The rules of his condition are pretty strict. As the new moon gets closer, the curse gets way stronger. Luca looks out the window at the night sky. He notes that the moon is starting to wane, and he can't help but wonder if everything is really going to be okay with the timing of all this. The scene shifts briefly to Luchil's perspective, looking back on how they got here. She thinks about the time Oswald's hawk attacked her. She recalls that ever since that specific day when Luca stepped in and saved her life, things have shifted between them. We see shots of their daily life now, hanging laundry together outside, cooking meals in the kitchen. Luchil feels like she and Luca have really started to open up to each other way more than before. She wonders if it's because she finally showed him her true feelings. She remembers simply telling him thank you and realizes that honesty made a difference. Back in the present moment, Luchil is looking out the window while Luca sits at the table. She points out that the moon isn't out tonight, so the stars are super visible. Luca seems a bit distracted but acknowledges her observation. Luca looks down, realizing exactly what that means. It's a new moon. Luchil is deep in thought too. She knows that curses are usually tied to the moon's phases, getting stronger as it waxes and wanes, but she's analyzing the situation. Luchil is deep in thought, seriously worrying about whether Luca is going to be okay with everything that's happening. She shakes off the worry and hypes herself up, pumping her fists. She tells herself that tonight is the night she's going to properly break that curse of his. But despite her big plans, the scene cuts to Luchil fast asleep in bed. Luca walks into the room quietly and finds her passed out. Luca lets out a sigh of relief when he sees her. He notes that she's sleeping really soundly. He watches her sleep for a moment with a gentle look on his face, just glad she's resting. Some time passes and Luchil sits up in bed, realizing she dozed off. She gets up and heads downstairs to look for Luca. She heads to Luca's room and peeks through the door, calling out his name to see if he's inside. But the room is empty. She looks at the made bed and realizes he's not there. Luchil stands there in the hallway, getting worried. She wonders if he actually went outside. She looks out at the dark, windy night and thinks about how going out into the forest on a night like this is seriously dangerous. Luchil steps out of the house and calls out Luca's name but gets no answer. The silence is heavy, and she realizes pretty quickly that he's not just hanging around right outside the door. She wonders where on earth he could have gone. Looking up, she notices it's a new moon, meaning there's barely any natural light out here. She doesn't wait around, though. She starts walking, her boots crunching on the forest floor as she heads into the trees. As soon as she gets under the canopy, she realizes how serious this is. Without the moon, the inside of the forest is pitch black. Her instinct is to fix that immediately. She raises her hand to cast a light spell, thinking she needs to see, but she suddenly clenches her fist and stops herself, deciding against it. She figures that on a night this dark, Luca has to be using a magic tool or a lantern to see where he's going. And in this level of darkness, a light like that is going to stand out like crazy. So she decides to stay in the dark. If she keeps her own light off, it'll actually be way easier to spot his light source in the distance. Plus, there's another reason she wants to stay hidden. She pulls her hood up, reasoning that if she lights herself up, he's going to spot her coming from a mile away. And she's got a really bad feeling that if he sees her coming right now, he's just going to turn around and run away. Luchil finally spots someone in the darkness. She calls out Luca's name. Luca turns around, looking a bit surprised to see her, and notes that it's Luchil. He asks her what exactly she's doing out here. Luchil brushes it off as she approaches him, saying she's not doing anything special, just came out for a change of pace. As she takes a seat right next to him, Luca asks if she really felt like getting a change of pace this late at night. He gives her a bit of a sad smile and admits his own plan. He was just thinking about staying out here until morning. Luchil looks right at him and asks if he's doing that for her sake. They sit there together in silence for a moment, side by side in the dark forest. Luchil starts breaking down what he's actually worried about. She says he's thinking that if her magic wears off and he turns back into that huge wolf, he might end up eating her. She tells him that's exactly what went through his head. Luca looks away, unable to deny it. Luchil confirms that's the real reason he came out here for his so-called change of pace. Luca gives a resigned, defeated smile. He tells Luchil that she really seems to figure everything out. Luchil curls up, hugging her knees, and shuts that idea down immediately. She replies that no, she definitely doesn't understand everything. She brings up her past to prove the point, mentioning that she had absolutely no clue she was going to get exiled from her role as the saint back then. Moving past the heavy topic, Luchil calls out his name and suggests they just head back home. But before they move, she looks him dead in the eye and makes a promise. She swears to him that he won't turn back into a wolf tonight. Luca looks completely taken aback by her confidence. Luchil just smiles, tells him to watch, and points her finger up toward the night sky. Suddenly, 3 massive, glowing spirit whales materialize above them, swimming gracefully through the starlit air. Luchil explains that her magic power is actually stronger now than it was in the past. She holds up 3 fingers, proudly noting that she used to only be able to create one of these things, but now she's got 3 of them going. Watching her brag a little, Luca covers his mouth and lets out a genuine laugh. Hearing him laugh, Luchil completely freezes up and lets out a small gasp of surprise. Luchil thinks she's made her point with the spirit whales. She asks him if he agrees, suggesting they just head back home now. But Luca doesn't get up. He stares down at his boots sitting near the tree stump and quietly shuts that idea down, saying no. His hands clench tight against his legs, gripping the fabric of his pants. He brings the conversation back to the night. He explains the reality of his condition. He tells her that when he transforms into a wolf, he completely blacks out. He doesn't remember a single thing. Luca starts opening up about his past. He reveals that a long time ago, there was actually someone who came to this forest specifically to try and break his curse and save him. His expression is shadowed as he admits that this wasn't just anybody, it was someone really important to him. But then the story takes a dark turn. He describes the aftermath. He says that when he finally regained consciousness, the only things he saw were the morning sun rising and blood on the ground. In a horrified flashback, Luca remembers realizing what happened. He tells Luchil that he had hurt that precious person with his own hands. Luca looks completely haunted by the memory. Luchil stands there in the wind, her expression shifting to serious as she absorbs the heavy story he just dropped on her. Luchil looks straight at him with zero hesitation. She tells him clearly that he is not going to turn into a wolf anymore. She reaches out for his hand. She admits that even if she can't do it right this second, she is definitely going to break his curse. She clasps his hand tight in both of hers. She assures him that there won't be any more hurting people or hurting her. That's over. She looks him in the eye while holding his hands and asks if he won't put his faith in her power and trust her. Luca looks down, sweating and looking conflicted. He stammers that no, it's not that he doesn't trust her, he's just saying all this as a precaution because he's terrified of what might happen. Luchil doesn't accept that. The camera zooms in on her determined eye as she simply asks him to believe in her. She paints a picture of his future. She tells him that from now on, he's going to sleep peacefully through the night, staying in his human form. She clasps her hands together against her chest like she's making a solemn vow. She promises him that she will make that happen. Luchil closes her eyes, looking calm. Inside, she feels like something has clicked into place. A firm decision has settled in her heart. Memories flash by of all the times Luca was good to her, smiling, holding her hand, carrying her. She thinks to herself that this feeling, this resolve she has now, is probably all because of Luca's kindness. Luchil decides to drop the heavy truth on him. She reveals that she used to be a saint, specifically the saint who protected the people of this country. The camera zooms in on Luca's eyes as he processes this. Luchil gives him her full real name, Luchil Marastella. She explains her past, showing a view of the capital city. She tells him that her power was recognized by the country itself. We see scenes of peaceful town life from her memories. She continues explaining that she was the one who protected the nation. There's an image of a saint standing in a holy spring. Luchil looks somber as she admits she was a human who held that kind of special power. She connects the dots for him. She promises that as long as her power is by his side, he won't ever have to turn back into a wolf at night. She holds his hands tight and looks him dead in the eye. She asks him if he's willing to believe in her now. Luca looks at their joined hands. He quietly says he understands now. He admits that he already suspected she wasn't just some ordinary person. He looks back at her with a gentle expression. He tells her firmly that he will believe in her. Luchil smiles through tears of relief. Luca thanks her for telling him the truth. Back on the roof, the heavy conversation winds down. Luca suggests that since they've cleared the air, they should head back inside the house. He gives Luchil a warm, genuine smile and agrees that it's time to go in. The tension from earlier is completely gone, replaced by a comfortable vibe between them. The scene shifts entirely to the Holy Kingdom of Litties. We see the exterior of the Temple of Dawn, then move inside to the prayer room. Inside, Sarah, the new saint, is standing before the holy spring with her eyes closed, deep in prayer. Several handmaidens are standing respectfully in the background watching her. But it's not going well. Sarah's expression tightens with frustration. She mutters a quiet, angry question to herself, asking why something isn't working. She grips the stone edge of the spring so hard her hands tremble. She demands to know why she can't perform the task at hand. Her frustration boils over into jealousy. She grits her teeth, telling herself there is absolutely no way she's going to lose to the previous saint. She refuses to accept being inferior to Marastella. Seeing Sarah's distress, one of the shrine maidens, Nina, tries to intervene gently. She steps forward and respectfully advises Sarah to listen to the goddess's voice and try to calm her heart down. Sarah snaps instantly. In a fit of rage, she grabs Nina by her hair and violently throws the girl to the ground, causing Nina to scream in terror. While Nina cowers on the floor crying, Sarah looms over her, completely losing it. She asks Nina who she thinks she is to give her orders. She scoffs, reminding Nina that she only has her position as first shrine maiden because she's a noble and because Sarah graciously allowed it, basically telling her she's just a figurehead. Sarah continues her verbal assault on Nina. She screams that Nina needs to know her place, telling the crying girl that she isn't even worthy to stand at her feet before spitting out one final insult about her being a lowly noble. Sometime later, outside the room, we see Nina's true colors. Despite the earlier drama, she's standing there looking completely unbothered, internally complaining about how bored she is. The scene focuses on the closed doors of the prayer room. Inside, Sarah is currently trying to offer prayers to create the barrier. The reason for her desperation becomes clear. Ever since the king scolded her, Sarah has been panicking, thinking she has to get a barrier up no matter what. Because of this pressure, she started locking herself in the prayer room for hours on end. Back outside, Nina lets out a huge yawn. She thinks about how annoying this is. Because Sarah refuses to come out, the staff can't leave either. She turns to another maid and calls out, "Hey, Lara." Nina points toward the door and asks if it doesn't sound kind of noisy inside the room all of a sudden. She pauses, listening closely, and realizes that, yeah, there is definitely something going on in there. Just as she notes the commotion, the double doors burst open. Sarah comes storming out in a rage. The other handmaidens panic and call out for her to wait, but Sarah ignores them, shoving her way through. She completely loses it on the staff. She screams at them about their lowly noble behavior and demands they not touch her. While she storms off, Nina and the other maids are left standing there, whispering to each other and wondering what the hell just happened. Sarah finally hits a wall and collapses to her knees. She cries out that she's reached her limit, asking why she has to go through such a terrible experience when nothing she tries is working out. Her mind starts spiraling into paranoia. She convinces herself that everything is going wrong because the shrine maidens are cold to her. In her head, the women surrounding her turn into dark, laughing silhouettes, and she accuses them of actively harassing her. She turns her aggression outward, yelling at the group that they must be hiding the method for creating the barrier from her. She spits venom at them, calling them lowly people and a gathering of incompetence. Tears well up in her eyes as her delusion deepens. She tells them that they're just watching her struggle and accuses them of actually enjoying her suffering. But beneath the anger, panic is setting in. A dark thought crosses her mind that at this rate, she bites her thumb in sheer terror, realizing the consequences. She thinks that Oswald will end up hating her, but it goes even further than that. If she fails, she might not even be allowed to stay in the country. Desperate to shift the blame, she points a shaking finger at the handmaidens. She screams that they are the ones dragging her down and demands they say something to defend themselves. Then, she finds a specific target. She steps toward one of the girls and notes that, now that she thinks about it, this girl holds the title of First Shrine Maiden. Nina confirms that yes, that is her. Sarah immediately gets in her face, pointing an accusatory finger right at her and shouting that Nina is the one hiding the holy barrier method from her. The accusation hangs in the air, but Nina just stares back with dead eyes. Internally, she thinks about how she isn't hiding a single thing. Nina stands there in the dark, and honestly the answer is crystal clear to her. She realizes that the reason everything is going to hell is simply because the new saint, Sarah, just doesn't have the talent for the job. That's literally all there is to it, but Nina keeps her mouth shut. She knows that even if she said that out loud right now, it wouldn't change a thing. Sarah completely snaps. She accuses Nina of hiding the secret method for the barrier on purpose. Nina actually gasps, caught off guard, while Sarah continues her rant, claiming Nina is happy to see her struggle and calling her a lowlife for it. Sarah isn't done yet. She threatens to run straight to her father about this, screaming that if she does, Nina is going to get executed. Sarah starts flexing her status, grinning like a maniac. She reminds Nina that she's the daughter of the Greco family, the top dogs among the nobility, and says Nina's life is so worthless it would disappear if she just blew on it. Nina, keeping her cool, simply replies that she isn't hiding anything. The two lock eyes, but their internal states are totally different. Nina finally accepts the hard truth about why the barrier isn't working. In her mind, she compares the two women. She realizes that Sarah's holy power doesn't even come close to what Luchel, the previous saint, was capable of. It's not a matter of secrets, it's a difference in raw power. Sarah is shaking, gripping her wand so hard her hand might cramp. She's absolutely fuming. She explodes again, screaming at Nina not to make a fool out of her. She yells about her lineage again, insisting that she excels in holy magic even among the nobles. Sarah refuses to accept reality. She shouts that there is absolutely no way she's inferior to the previous saint. Later, inside the head priest's office, Nina finishes giving her report. She explains that this is exactly how the situation went down with Sarah. The head priest listens quietly, stroking his beard. After a moment of thought, he looks up and asks Nina if her injury is okay. Nina touches the bandage on her cheek and dismisses his concern, telling him it's nothing serious. She reflects on the aftermath of the incident. While her colleague Saria was patching her up, Nina admits she was furious at first. But seeing Saria panic and say how awful it was for Sarah to do such a thing actually helped Nina calm down a little. Back in the present, Nina's expression hardens. She tells the head priest bluntly that the new saint is absolutely worthless. She adds that it was the first time she had ever seen Sarah lose her temper like that. The head priest looks exhausted. He wonders aloud if this difficult situation is just going to keep dragging on. Nina clenches her hands into fists against her dress. She insists that having a saint like Sarah around brings absolutely no benefit to the temple. The head priest interrupts her though. He tells her no and says that isn't necessarily true. Nina looks confused, letting out a small sound of surprise. The head priest explains the bigger picture. The king currently places all his trust in Oswald, which means the Magic Bureau is rapidly gaining power. Right now, the Magic Bureau holds all the real authority in the kingdom. The head priest starts breaking down the power structure of the kingdom. He lists the first pillar of influence, the temple. Then he names the other two major powers, the Magic Bureau and the Night Order. He explains that the balance between these three organizations has completely collapsed. The Magic Bureau got too aggressive with its power, and things went so far that they actually forced the saint into exile. But he tells Nina to look at the situation differently. He suggests that this crisis is actually a perfect opportunity for them to take back the power the temple lost. He points out the obvious facts. The Magic Bureau put Sarah in place as the new saint, but she is absolutely no substitute for Lady Luchel. As a result, the barrier that protects the entire country has shattered. He adds that because the barrier is down, the common people are taking a massive hit and suffering serious damage. On top of that, he predicts that the knights and magicians who are being forced to go out and fight these endless waves of monsters are going to get fed up. Their dissatisfaction is just going to keep growing. He says the public perception is shifting, too. Everyone knows the Magic Bureau chased Lady Luchel out, so everyone knows the Magic Bureau is the reason this disaster is happening. The head priest sounds pretty confident as he says that from here on out, the Magic Bureau's status is going to take a nosedive. He breaks down his endgame strategy. Basically, the more the country falls apart without Lady Luchel, the worse Oswald looks. And eventually, that failure is going to cut the legs right out from under the Magic Bureau. Nina isn't fully on board with this risky plan, though. She asks the head priest what happens to the country while they wait for things to fall apart. She points out that the whole place might get destroyed by monsters before their plan even works. The head priest reassures her that he won't let it go that far. He explains that before total destruction happens, he'll extract favorable conditions from the king to protect Lady Luchel's position, and then he'll have her return to save the day. He doubles down, stating that without Luchel, this country simply cannot function. He figures that even the king deep down has to understand that fact. The problem, according to the priest, is Oswald. He explains that right now, the king is being deceived by Oswald's reputation as a rare genius magician and has total blind trust in him. To break that spell, the priest argues it's actually better that Luchel stays missing for a while. Nina brings up a scary possibility, though. She reminds the priest that they're dealing with that Oswald. She worries that he's going to do whatever it takes to hunt Luchel down. She's afraid that once he finds her, he's just going to lock her up in a cell so she can never leave again. The head priest doesn't seem worried about that at all. He reminds Nina that Lady Luchel is an orphan with no family connections, so nobody, not even Oswald, has a clue where she would go to hide. On top of that, he praises Luchel's intelligence. He says she's smart enough not to stay in any place where she could be easily discovered. He's confident she won't come out of hiding until she's absolutely sure it's safe to return. Nina listens to his reasoning and has to admit he's right about that. Nina thinks it over, picturing Luchel's smiling face. She admits to herself that while Luchel can be a little bit clumsy and scatterbrained sometimes, underneath that she really is a very smart person. Back at the temple, Nina is deep in thought. She tells herself that she's been watching Luchel closely for a long time, so she knows exactly what kind of person she is. Nina clasps her hands together and prays desperately. She sends a silent wish to Luchel, hoping that no matter what happens, Oswald never manages to find her. The scene shifts to the sky above the forest. Nina's internal voice continues, hoping that wherever Luchel is right now, she's spending her day in good health and high spirits. But irony strikes immediately. Cut to Luchel, who is absolutely not in good health. She's coughing her lungs out. Luchel groans and tries to sit up in bed, but she's weak. Luca walks through the door carrying a tray and quickly tells her not to push it. She doesn't need to force herself to get up. It turns out Luchel has completely caught a cold. She's shivering under the covers while Luca sets down some water and supplies for her. Luca looks apologetic. He says he's sorry it turned out like this, explaining that usually he could fix most illnesses instantly with a magic potion, but he's unfortunately completely out of stock right now. Luchel, looking flushed and feverish, tells him not to worry about it. She insists that she'll be fine and just needs to sleep it off. She tries to downplay the whole thing, saying it's not worth him stressing over, but Luca steps closer to the bedside anyway. He asks if he can check her fever. Luchel, too weak to argue, gives him a small nod. Luca places his hand on her forehead to check her temperature. For Luchel, his hand feels nice and cool against her burning skin, but Luca recoils slightly with a sharp breath, clearly startled by how much heat she's radiating. He looks genuinely concerned now, telling her that a fever this high definitely isn't okay. Luchel is barely conscious at this point, just staring blankly and mumbling a weak, confused response. Luca tells her to hang on for a second and turns away, immediately starting to rummage through his shelves to find something that can help since he's out of magic potions. He comes back with a vial of regular medicine. Luchel tries to force herself to sit up, but Luca quickly stops her, telling her not to push it. She can stay lying down while she takes it. He supports her head and gently brings the vial to her lips, coaching her to drink it slowly, just a little bit at a time. As soon as she finishes, Luchel loses the last of her strength and drops her head against his chest with a soft thud, whispering a quiet "thank you." Luca holds her there, looking a bit pained himself. He murmurs that she must have just let all her exhaustion pile up until it finally crashed down on her like this. He gently tells her to rest well now. Luchil doesn't argue, her eyes slide shut and she drifts off to sleep immediately. Some time passes. There's a polite knock at the door and Luca's voice comes through from the hallway asking Luchil if it's alright for him to come in. The sound wakes her up. Luchil blinks her eyes open, still groggy from the fever, and manages to give him a weak permission to enter. Luchil wakes up and sits up in bed, noticing the dim light outside. She realizes it's already evening and asks if she really slept through the whole day. Luca enters the room carrying a tray. He confirms that she was out cold and definitely got some good sleep. He sets the tray down and walks over to the bed. Asking how she's feeling, he apologizes for the intrusion and places his hand on her forehead to check her temperature again. He notes that she still seems a bit feverish. Luchil tries to reassure him, insisting that she's doing way better than yesterday and that she's already taken the medicine he gave her. But then Luchil notices the time. She pushes the fever talk aside, telling him that more importantly, she needs to perform the ritual to weaken his curse since night is coming. Luca looks shocked that she's even thinking about that right now. He protests, pointing out that she's clearly still in bad shape herself. Luchil grabs his hand with a smile, countering that if they don't do this, the curse will return fully and he's the one who will be in trouble. Luca looks conflicted. He admits she's right about the curse, but he clearly hates making a sick person work. Luchil doesn't give him a choice, telling him to just leave it to her. She activates her saint powers, filling the room with a warm, bright light as she suppresses the curse in him. The light fades and their hands separate. Luca looks at his hands, grateful for the help, and quietly thanks her. Since it's night, he still needs to distance himself for safety. He stands up and tells her he's going to leave the house for a little while, promising to return as soon as he can. Luca checks one last time to make sure she's going to stay put and rest properly while he's gone. Luchil smiles and assures him that of course she will. Before he heads out, Luca remembers something. He points a finger and asks Luchil if there's anything specific she wants to eat or if there's anything she needs him to get. Luchil immediately shakes her head to say no, but Luca doesn't accept that right away. He suggests that maybe she has a favorite food or something similar she'd like. She tells him again that there's nothing she needs, but Luca presses a little harder, asking her what she truthfully wants. Luchil looks totally confused by his question, wondering what he means by truthfully. Luca explains that he means she doesn't need to hold back or be polite. Since she's sick, she shouldn't feel reserved. If there's anything at all she wants to eat or have, he promises to bring it for her. Luchil gives a genuine, warm smile and insists again that there really isn't anything she needs. Internally, she's thinking practically. She figures that since they are deep in the forest, even if she did want something, the only options would probably be mushrooms or nuts anyway, so asking for anything fancy is pointless. Luca isn't letting it go though. Standing by her bed, he tells her that asking is free, so she might as well just say it. Luchil goes quiet for a moment, thinking it over. She gets a bit shy, bringing her hands up to her face, and finally admits that there is actually something she wants. Luchil admits to Luca that she hasn't really thought about that kind of stuff before. Luca switches gears and asks her what kind of food she liked when she was a kid. Luchil hesitates for a moment, trying to recall. She remembers something specific, apple pie with ice cream on top. Luca keeps pressing, asking what items she wanted as a child. Luchil laughs a little and asks if he's really still going with this, warning him that her answers are just silly things. She starts listing them off, mentioning sparkly accessories and frilly dresses that look like something a princess would wear. She explains that since the temple forbade the color red, she used to dream about trying on red clothes when she was little. Luca just says he sees. Luchil gets all flushed and admits that saying all this out loud is actually pretty embarrassing. Moving on, Luca tells her that he's made soup in the kitchen pot, so she should eat some if she feels up to it. He heads for the door, telling her he's going out now and reminding her to stay resting while he's gone. The door clicks shut behind him. Luchil stares at it, totally confused about what business he suddenly has to take care of. Luchil is lying in bed thinking to herself. Even though she's been sleeping a ton already, she still feels like she could pass right back out. Her eyes start to close, and she tells herself she needs to hurry up and get her health back. But just as she's drifting off, she hears a quiet noise in the darkness. Her eyes snap open instantly. She senses a person's presence in the room. Luchil stares into the pitch-black room and asks who's there. A voice answers from the shadows, saying that even though it's too dark to see anything, they know one thing for sure: the person in the bed isn't Luca. A silhouette of a woman in a dress stands there. She starts firing off questions, demanding to know who Luchil is and asking why a woman like her is even in this place. The stranger grins in the dark and starts giggling. She warns Luchil that if she doesn't get out of here, she's going to end up getting eaten by Luca when he transforms into a wolf. Luchil sits up, confused and on guard, and asks again who this person is. The woman just deflects, saying that she's the one asking the questions here. She points out that Luchel definitely wasn't around here before. Finally stepping into view, the dark-haired woman gives Luchel an intense look. She refers to him as my Luca, and wonders out loud what exactly Luchel's relationship is with him. The mysterious woman smiles, though it looks pretty sinister, and demands an explanation. Luchel looks at her and thinks that while the stranger is undeniably beautiful, there's a noticeable scar running down her cheek. The woman shifts, her long hair trailing behind her as she adds another point to her interrogation. Luchel stares at the intruder and realizes something is off. She tells the woman she isn't actually there in physical form, is she? Luchel mentions she's heard of a technique called dream walking, where a person's soul can travel around while their body sleeps. The woman's eyes narrow sharply. She confirms Luchel is spot on. She traveled here using dream walking. She notes that Luchel seems to understand magic a little bit. Meanwhile, Luchel is staring at her, thinking she's definitely seen this person somewhere before, but she just can't remember where. The woman speaks up, saying she feels like she's seen Luchel somewhere before too. This thought hits Luchel hard. She freezes, wondering if this woman actually recognizes her and knows who she really is. But the woman just brushes it off, deciding it doesn't matter. She touches the scar on her cheek and declares that the only person Luca loves is her. She claims Luca's curse is actually happening because of his deep love for her. She adds that she can't imagine Luca taking an interest in anyone else, but she's going to say this just to be safe. Getting right in Luchel's face with a menacing grin, she warns her that trying to mess with Luca is completely useless. Luchel starts to protest, trying to tell the woman that she's got the wrong idea and she isn't trying to mess with anything. But before she can finish her sentence, the mysterious woman's body starts glowing brightly and fading away right in front of her. Luchel looks outside and realizes what's happening. The sun is coming up, and since dream walking is strictly night magic, the connection breaks the second the morning light hits. Just like that, the woman vanishes completely into thin air. Luchel is left standing there, thinking that she completely missed her chance to ask who that person actually was. Suddenly, a clattering noise comes from the window. The shutters rattle open, and Luchel immediately spots a familiar face calling out Luca's name. Luca looks surprised to see her up and about. He calls back to her, asking if she's already awake this early. He walks through the door, looking a bit tired but back in his human form. He says he's home and apologizes for taking so long to get back. Luchel just gives him a warm smile and tells him welcome home. Luca drops his bag with a heavy thud and gets ready to settle in, saying now then as he starts unpacking. Luca hands a small bottle to Luchel, telling her to drink it first. Luchel looks at the glass vial and asks if it's a magic potion. It dawns on Luchel that he must have left the forest to get this, and she asks if he actually went all the way to town. Luca explains that usually monsters and beastmen can't cross the forest boundary, but since Luchel's power turned him back into a human, he was able to leave without any issues. He scratches his cheek awkwardly, admitting that the town was surprisingly far away and the trip took a lot longer than he thought it would. But Luca waves off her concern, telling her the details don't matter and she should just focus on drinking the medicine. Luchel looks at the high-quality potion and says it looks amazing. She pops the cork and drinks the contents in one go. The effect is instant. Luchel checks her body and happily announces that she's healed, or at least she thinks she is. Luca gives her a gentle smile and says he's glad it worked. Luchel beams back at him and agrees. Moving on, Luca starts rustling through his bag again. He asks her if she feels well enough to eat something now. He pulls out a pastry and Luchel's eyes go wide. She immediately recognizes it as Grandma Maria's apple pie, a treat that is massively popular with girls. She points out that this is from a super famous shop. Luchel tells him that back in the Holy Capital, people have to wait in line for an hour just to buy one of these. Luca looks away, blushing slightly, and simply says he lined up and bought it. Luchel holds her cheeks, completely touched that he stood in a long line just to get her a treat. Luchel starts giggling as the realization hits her. She looks at the pie and then back at Luca, finally understanding the effort he put in. She realizes he actually waited in that massive line just for her, and she thanks him sincerely. Luca looks a bit awkward at the gratitude and asks what she was laughing about earlier. Luchel explains that she was just imagining him standing in a line full of girls to buy apple pie. In her head, she pictures all the girls blushing and wondering who the handsome prince is. She tells him the mental image is cute, and Luca sarcastically thanks her for the compliment. Deciding to move past the embarrassment, Luca holds out the pastry and tells her to just eat it already. Luchel takes a big bite of the famous treat. Her eyes light up immediately, and she exclaims that it's delicious. Luca smiles, relieved that she likes it. He mentions that he actually wanted to add ice cream to it, but they'll have to save that for another time. Luchel gets super excited and asks if he's serious. She tells him it's a promise, and Luca gives a soft chuckle, agreeing to it. But then Luchel casually drops a comment that completely freezes him. While munching on the pie, she says that having a big brother like Luca would be really fun. The word brother hits Luca like a ton of bricks. Luca looks completely defeated. He thinks to himself that it would have been way more romantic if she had said lover instead, but he sighs and accepts his fate, telling himself he's confident he can at least be a fun big brother. Luchel suddenly remembers the intense encounter from earlier. The memory of that dark-haired woman claiming Luca only loves her flashes through her mind, making her gasp in shock. She shakes her head, realizing she messed up. She admits to herself that the apple pie was so good she completely forgot to mention the intruder, so she quickly calls out to Luca to get his attention. Luchel decides to just rip the bandage off and asks him straight up if he has a lover. Luca is completely blindsided by the random question and just looks at her in confusion. She explains her reasoning, telling him that while he was out shopping, a woman actually came to the house using a specific type of magic called dream walking. Luca seems unfamiliar with the specific term, so Luchel breaks it down for him. She explains that it's a technique where the soul travels to a location while the body stays behind, and it's something only really high-level magicians can pull off. She points out that for someone to use such advanced magic just to come here means they must have been desperate to see him. Luchel acts like an expert on romance, stating that anyone who goes that far is basically guaranteed to be a lover. Luca doesn't look convinced at all and just mutters the word lover with a skeptical look on his face. He decides to verify this himself and asks what this visitor looked like. Luchel thinks back to the encounter and notes that the woman was incredibly beautiful. As she visualizes the woman's face, a specific detail pops into her mind. She tells Luca that the woman had a distinctive long scar running along the side of her neck. Luchel freezes for a second. The description she just gave seems to trigger something, and the name Luca floats through her mind, making her wonder if there's a deeper connection she's missing. But Luca shuts the conversation down immediately. His expression darkens a bit as he looks away, simply telling her to just leave the matter alone. Luchel looks surprised by his sudden dismissal and asks him if he's really okay with just ignoring it. Luchel starts to say that treating a lover that way is a bit harsh, but Luca cuts her off. He tells her he can swear on it, he absolutely does not have a lover. He explains himself, recalling his past. He mentions that back when he served as a knight, he had quite a few hangers-on constantly surrounding him, so it's possible there are still humans out there desperate to meet him for that reason. Then he completely shifts the mood, flashing a charming smile and posing. He jokes that it's just because he's such a wonderful big brother figure that everyone loves him. Luchel stares at him, seeing right through the act. She realizes that this sudden shift to humor is his way of drawing a line. He's making it clear he doesn't want to be asked anything else about that woman. She decides to respect his boundaries and thinks it would be rude to pry any further. To break the tension, she immediately starts stuffing her cheeks with the apple pie, mumbling about how delicious it is. Luca bursts out laughing at the sight of her, noting that she's eating awfully fast. Luchel gets completely flustered, stammering out an excuse that she's only eating fast because the pie is so good. Luca gently teases her that she should have relaxed and enjoyed it more slowly. Luchel covers her burning face, feeling totally embarrassed by her gluttony. But she has to admit to herself that Grandma Maria's famous apple pie really did live up to the rumors. Luca calls for Luchel to get her attention. Now that they're finished with the pie, he tells her there's something he wants her to take a look at. Luchel's eyes go wide as she sees what he's talking about. Laid out in front of her is a stunning, frilly dress along with sparkling jewelry, a necklace and earrings. Luchel stares at the pile of gifts, completely confused, and asks what all this is. Luca tells her simply that it's for her. He explains that she can't just keep wearing his oversized hand-me-downs forever since it's inconvenient, though he admits he's not sure if this style actually suits her taste. He looks at her with a gentle expression, listing off the sparkly accessories and the dress, and asks if she's cool with this kind of stuff. Luchel doesn't answer immediately. She just stands there with her back to him, staring at the dress. Luca notices her silence and calls her name, sounding a bit concerned. She starts shaking, and Luca instantly worries that he messed up, asking if she didn't like it. Luchel shakes her head frantically side to side, stammering out a denial. She turns around, face completely flushed. She clarifies that it's not that she doesn't like it, that's not it at all. She clasps her hands together and asks him emotionally if it's really okay for her to accept something like this. Luca smiles, relieved. He tells her of course she can have it. He figures this is the kind of thing she's probably wanted ever since she was a little kid. Luchil fidgets, squeezing her hands together tightly. She starts to ask a question but hesitates. She looks up at him, her expression serious and touched. She asks him directly why he's being so incredibly good to her. Luca answers her question with a warm, slightly bashful smile. He reminds her that she's his benefactor, isn't she? He tells her there's no need to hold back or hesitate. He cracks a joke, pointing out that it's not like he can wear this stuff himself. Luchil admits that might be true, but she still looks a bit uncertain. Luca drops the humor and looks at her gently, telling her straight up that he just wants her to have them. Luchil finally caves. She clasps her hands together, looking down at the necklace. She thanks him sincerely for his kindness and tells him she'll use everything gratefully. Hearing that, Luca closes his eyes and smiles, looking visibly relieved. He just says he's glad. He steps away to give her some space, and Luchil turns her attention back to the pile of clothes on the bed to see what he actually bought. She picks up one of the fancier items. It's a striking blue satin dress that feels smooth to the touch. She admires it, thinking that even though there's probably zero chance she'll ever have an occasion to wear something this fancy while living in a forest, it's still undeniably beautiful. Moving on to the rest of the pile, she finds a shirt that looks much more practical. She figures this one will be perfect for everyday wear. Then something else catches her eye, a cute red dress. Luchil calls out Luca's name to get his attention. She says this might be sudden, but she asks if it's all right for her to try on the red dress right now. Luca agrees immediately, telling her he'll step outside to give her privacy. Luca waits in the hallway until the door creaks open. Luchil speaks from the room, apologizing for keeping him waiting. Luca sees her in the new outfit and offers a sincere compliment, telling her that it suits her really well. Luchil spins around, admiring the fabric. She calls the deep crimson color beautiful. She adds that since she was never allowed to wear colors like this back at the temple, wearing something this vibrant feels completely fresh to her. But as she moves, her foot catches on the unfamiliar hem and she stumbles forward. Before she can hit the floor, Luca reacts fast and catches her in his arms. He holds her steady, sighing and asking if she's okay. He scolds her gently, warning that she'll get hurt if she falls like that. Luchil, flustered by the close contact, apologizes and assures him she's fine. Suddenly, a sound effect rings out and Luca's wolf ears pop right out of his head, his curse reacting to the sudden excitement. Luchil stares blankly and points out the ears. Luca freaks out and jumps back, waving his hands in denial. He stammers that this isn't what she thinks, claiming the transformation only happened because she caught him off guard. Luchil just giggles, teasing him that he's making it sound like it's her fault. In the background, Luca tries to get his breathing under control, insisting that it was just an unavoidable accident. Recovering from the shock of the ear-popping incident, Luca tries to shift some of the embarrassment. He tells Luchil that she shares some of the blame for startling him and adds a warning for her to watch her step next time. Luchil, still sitting on the floor, laughs awkwardly and apologizes. Later, the scene shifts to the exterior of the forest house. Luchil comes down the stairs and calls out to Luca, offering to help him make dinner. Luca looks concerned, asking if she's really up for it since she's just recovering from her illness. Luchil strikes an energetic pose, flexing her arms and assuring him that thanks to the magic potion, she's full of energy. Seeing her enthusiasm, Luca smiles and agrees, saying in that case he'll gladly accept her help. They start chopping vegetables together in the kitchen. Out of nowhere, Luchil asks if he was popular with women back when he was a knight. The question catches Luca completely off guard, and he stops chopping, sweating as he asks what's wrong with her all of a sudden. Luchil doesn't let up. She points out that he just mentioned earlier that he had a lot of hangers-on or followers during his knight days. She argues that if he drops information like that, naturally she's going to get curious about it. Luca is left speechless. Luca tries to stammer his way out of it, but Luchil leans in with sparkles in her eyes. She asks him specifically what kind of person he fell in love with and wonders aloud what his type is. Realizing there's no escape, Luca sighs and gives in. He tells her fine, he'll tell her about it. He starts describing the person, mentioning that she was petite and had big eyes. Luchil listens eagerly, nodding along. Luca continues his description, saying she had long, transparent golden hair. He adds a very specific detail about how she would sometimes put raspberries in her skirt. Luchil listens to the details, looking a bit thoughtful as she processes the description. Luchil decides to have a little fun with the situation. She starts teasing Luca, making up a story about a girl offering prayers every day and raising Starsha, a user of sparkly curse-breaking magic. Luca isn't having it and immediately shuts her down, telling her to cut out those kinds of jokes. Luca looks away, muttering that listening to his stories is probably boring anyway. He decides to flip the script and asks Luchil to tell him about her love life instead. Luchil admits she doesn't actually have any love stories of her own to share. She explains that since she has zero experience, she finds it way more fun to listen to other people's romance stories. She breaks down the reality of her situation at the temple. It turns out romance was strictly prohibited there. On top of the rules, there were barely any men around, and the few male priests who were there were old guys that the romance-obsessed shrine maidens had absolutely no interest in. While he's chopping vegetables, Luca points out a technicality. He mentions that even if she was a saint, she surely had a fiancé. He recalls the custom that the saint is supposed to be engaged to the first magician of the magic bureau. Luca looks over at her with a serious expression and gets straight to the point. He asks about that fiancé and wonders if she didn't love him. The question triggers a memory for Lucha. She recalls that yes, she technically had a fiancé, the first magician, Oswald. Her internal reaction is immediate. She thinks to herself that if anyone asked if she actually liked Oswald, the answer would be a hard definitely not. Trying to be diplomatic, Lucha explains it to Luca. She tells him that regarding her fiancé, rather than liking him, he was honestly just a difficult person to deal with. Lucha explains the mess she's in, telling him she was exiled specifically because that fiancé of hers annulled their engagement. Luca looks completely confused, sweating a bit as he asks what the heck that even means. He takes a second to process it. He admits it's surprising, but at the same time he says he actually understands. He mutters to himself that it all makes sense now. Luca connects the dots, confirming she's talking about Oswald, the first magician of the Holy Kingdom. He says if Oswald is the one who chased her out, he totally buys it. That sounds exactly like something that guy would do. Lucha asks if he actually knows Oswald. Luca admits that he's never directly spoken to him, though. He explains that he used to see Oswald around a few times back when he was working at the royal palace. He notes that the magician is still pretty young. Luca reveals that Oswald has a pretty nasty reputation. He was famous for forcibly kicking out the previous first magician just so he could take the spot for himself. Lucha starts to mention the time before Oswald took over. Luca agrees with her unsaid thought, confirming that Oswald isn't exactly known for having good character. He drops some history on who Oswald replaced. The previous first magician was Her Highness Elsa, who is now the princess consort to Prince Aris, the current king's brother. He clarifies that this was back before she married into the royal name Litties. Back then, she was known as Elsa Rose from the noble Rose family. Back when Elsa was the top dog as first magician, Oswald was stuck as the second magician. It turns out his commoner background played a part in his lower rank back then. Luca continues explaining the history, mentioning that he heard plenty of rumors back then that Oswald and Elsa didn't get along at all. He lays out the theory people had, that by getting Her Highness Elsa engaged to crown Prince Aris, Oswald effectively forced her out of the magic bureau to take her spot. Luca adds that he heard the engagement itself was pretty forceful. He looks a bit nervous as he tells her that wasn't the end of it either. He starts listing Oswald's track record, saying the guy used to invite workers from brothels right into the palace, which got him suspended from duty multiple times. Then there was the money. Luca recalls stories about Oswald hosting high-stakes illegal gambling rings inside the magic bureau that drove nobles to bankruptcy, only for him to hush up the whole scandal afterward. It gets worse. Luca describes how Oswald once shouted abuse at the ambassador from Ravel and actually set the man on fire with magic. Lucha looks completely horrified, stammering about how awful that is. Luca's expression darkens, his eyes shadowed as he says there's one more thing on top of all that. Lucha looks at him with concern, prompting him to continue. He brings up the royal family of Litties, specifically the current king's siblings. He reveals that aside from the eldest brother, Prince Aris, every other prince and princess died one after another during that time. The image paints a bloody picture as Luca delivers the punchline. The rumor on the street was that Oswald was the one who killed them all. Lucha looks shaken by the accusation, stammering as she tries to process the idea that Oswald might be a murderer. The narration explains the official story given to the public at the time, that the royal deaths were just a tragic string of epidemics and unforeseen accidents. Lucha admits that she believed that official cover back then, just like everyone else. A dark image of Oswald flashes through her mind, showing him smirking as he coldly orders someone to dispose of the targets. Lucha stands by the table, admitting that given everything she knows now, she can't just dismiss those dark stories as mere rumors anymore. Luca stands with his back to her, stating flatly that he believes the rumors are true. He adds that considering how trashy Oswald's behavior is in general, murder isn't a stretch. The mood settles a bit as they stand in the kitchen. Luca, busy peeling fruit, remarks that despite all that history, this is actually the first time he's heard the specific details of how she got kicked out of her position as saint. Luchil agrees, realizing she's never really spoken about it before. Luchil smiles sadly, calling it a terrible story. But she adds that talking about it has actually made something click for her. She finally understands what happened. Luca connects the dots immediately. He brings up the giant hawk that chased her into the forest when she first arrived, asking if that was Oswald's doing. He reasons that conjuring a magic beast of that size requires an insane amount of skill. He concludes that if Oswald was the one pulling the strings, the whole situation makes perfect sense. Luca doesn't seem surprised at all. He tells Luchil that if they're talking about Oswald, it wouldn't be weird if the guy tried to hurt her even after kicking her out of the country. He gets serious and calls out her name to make sure she's listening. Luca looks her dead in the eye and starts asking the big question about Oswald's intentions. He asks if Oswald is actually targeting her life. The scene pulls back to show both of them. Luca repeats the question clearly, asking if her ex is actively trying to kill her. Luchil looks down, looking pretty grim. She confirms it, admitting that yes, that's most likely what's happening. Luca lets out a heavy sigh, realizing just how messy this situation is. He tells her she's been targeted by a seriously troublesome guy, adding that he can't believe her ex-fiancé turned out to be that Oswald. But something doesn't sit right with him. He narrows his eyes and asks her directly why Oswald would go so far as to target her. Luchil thinks back to the day she was exiled, remembering Sarah clinging to Oswald. She tells Luca about the new woman, explaining that Oswald probably had a new lover and wanted to replace Luchil as the saint with her. Luchil concludes that she was simply in the way of their plans. But Luca isn't buying that explanation entirely. He points out that if she was just a hindrance to his new relationship, simply exiling her should have been enough to solve the problem. Luca isn't buying the whole hindrance theory. He asks her if there's really a need for Oswald to go this far and target her life just for that. Luchil admits that while she definitely got on Oswald's bad side, it does seem excessive. She's genuinely confused about it. Luchil wonders aloud why he's chasing her down so relentlessly, telling Luca she honestly doesn't understand the reason herself. Luca turns to her and asks the obvious question, why didn't she tell him any of this until now? Luchil hesitates, struggling to find the words. She looks down and admits the truth. Luchil was terrified that if she told him, he'd get dragged into the mess surrounding her. The thought of Oswald targeting Luca because of her was something she couldn't handle. The scene shifts to the exterior of the house at night. Luchil adds that since she was planning to leave the house eventually anyway, she decided it was better not to burden him with her situation at all. Hearing this, Luca's expression softens completely. He smiles gently, realizing that she kept everything to herself just because she was worried about his safety. He tells her she didn't need to worry about that at all. Luchil looks a bit surprised by how casually he brushes off the danger. Luca starts prepping food, chopping some vegetables on the counter. He says that regardless of the reason, they have to do something about Oswald, but then he realizes something else. This situation means she can't go back to being the saint. Luchil agrees that he's probably right, but then her expression changes to something more peaceful. She tells him that, to be honest, she has a confession. With a gentle smile, Luchil reveals that she actually doesn't mind if she never returns to being the saint. Luca looks at her, taking in her words. Luchil explains her reasoning to him. She says Oswald already set up a new saint to replace her. If that replacement can protect the kingdom and its people properly, then she's completely fine with stepping down. She smiles softly and admits that she was actually thinking she might just live quietly as a normal person somewhere. That sounded pretty good to her. The scene shifts briefly to her internal thoughts. She reflects that after she started living here with Luca, this current daily life they have together made her realize something. Living a normal life not as a saint but just as a regular person is actually really fun. Luca listens to her confession and just looks at her gently, saying he understands. But Luchil's expression drops a bit. She admits that even so, she is a little worried. She can't help but wonder if the barrier is really okay without her, and if the new saint is actually doing the job properly. Luca suddenly chuckles. Luchil gets confused and asks if she said something weird, but he denies it. He smiles and tells her he just thinks it's very typical of her to still be worrying about the country's safety, even after ending up in this situation. His tone gets a bit more serious as he points out the reality. Oswald is targeting her life, and on top of that, she was exiled by royal decree. He tells her straight up that after being treated like that, she has zero obligation to care about what happens to the country that kicked her out. Luchil looks back at him and gently disagrees. She acknowledges that Oswald and the king were the ones who kicked her out, but she insists that their actions have nothing to do with the innocent citizens living there. Luchil starts listing the people she's worried about, thinking of the families, the kids, and everyone living in the country. She also thinks about the people she worked with at the temple, mentioning the head priest and the other shrine maidens. Her expression softens as she admits that honestly, she just wants them all to be healthy and live without any worries. That's the only thing on her mind. She explains the stakes to Luca. Repelling monsters and keeping the barrier up is the saint's job, but if that isn't done properly, innocent people are going to be exposed to danger. It reminds her of something from her childhood. She tells Luca that her mother used to give her advice, telling her that if she has a special power, she should use it for the sake of others. She recalls her mother's words clearly, that a great power exists specifically to help people. Back in the kitchen, Luca listens to this while holding a pot lid and smiles. He comments that she had a good mother. Luchil smiles back and agrees. She goes back to preparing the food, tearing up some lettuce leaves. She explains that because of her mother's lesson, if someone is in trouble, she wants to use the power she was given to help them. But then her mood shifts a little as she thinks about her ex. She realizes that this exact mindset of hers is probably what ticked Oswald off. She figures he probably thought her ideas were completely stupid. She starts tearing the lettuce a little more aggressively just thinking about it. Luchil explains that Oswald was the type of guy who believed it was only natural for people to serve him, not the other way around. Luca watches her tear the lettuce in frustration and laughs, noting that it really seems like those two were a bad match. Luchil giggles a little and admits that yeah, it's probably a fact that she and Oswald just didn't get along. But then she tells Luca that she actually gets along with him really well. She points out that her mother was originally from Ravel, just like he is, so she wonders if maybe that's why they click so well. Luca recalls that she mentioned something about whales earlier when they were talking. Luchil gets excited and confirms that she heard about them from her mother. She admits she's never actually seen a real one herself, but her mom told her about the whales and how blue the ocean is. Her mom also taught her songs and dances from back home. Luchil explains that her mother was a really sociable person. She continues, saying that after her mother came to the Holy Kingdom of Litties to work as a shrine maiden, she ended up becoming friends with several nobles who were around her age. Her mother even told her specifically that if she ever got into trouble, she should go rely on those noble friends for help. But Luchil explains that considering how things turned out with her getting exiled and all, she couldn't really go dragging her mom's friends into it. Luca agrees, noting that if they are nobles, Oswald would probably try to pull some nasty stuff on them if they helped her. Luca hums in thought, and Luchil suddenly feels awkward. She realizes she feels like she's just been talking about herself the whole time. She calls out to Luca, telling him that her story is boring anyway. She changes the subject and says she wants to hear his story instead. Luchil presses on with her questioning, reminding Luca that he used to be a knight of Ravel. She asks if there wasn't any romance back then, like a love story with a princess straight out of those old knight tales. Luca looks pretty awkward about the whole topic and tells her not to get so energetic just because they're talking about romance, adding that she should act her age. But Luchil is fully invested now, looking all excited and telling him to just give up and spill the details. Luca stammers for a second, trying to find a way out, but then he points out something more urgent. He tells Luchil that the pot over there is boiling and she needs to take the lid off right now. Luchil turns to the stove, grumbling internally. She knows exactly what he's doing and thinks to herself that he definitely just changed the subject on purpose. She reaches for the pot while distracted and suddenly lets out a small cry as the steam or the hot lid burns her. Luca notices immediately from behind her. Without hesitation, Luca rushes over, grabs her hand, and dunks it straight into a bucket of water to cool it down. He inspects her hand closely while it's in the water, noting that the skin is turning red and confirming it's a burn. Luchil looks up at him, a bit surprised by his quick reaction. But then she smiles confidently and tells him not to worry. She reminds him that she can heal a little injury like this herself. She is a former saint after all. Luca relaxes and chuckles, admitting that she's right about that. The tension from the accident fades away. Later on, things have quieted down completely. Luchil has fallen fast asleep, resting her head on her arms at the table. Luca gently drapes a cloth over Luchil's shoulders as she sleeps at the table. Her earlier pestering echoes in his mind, questions about whether he ever had a romance with a princess or experienced a wonderful love. Those words trigger something. Luca looks down with a shadowed expression as a memory surfaces, a woman's voice calling his name. The flashback takes over. It shows Luca in his past life, dressed in a pristine white knight's uniform, standing in a garden with a woman who looks like royalty. In the memory, the woman looks heartbroken but devoted. She confesses that even after everything, she still loves him. Luca snaps out of it, thinking about Luchil's phrase, wonderful love. To him, that memory isn't wonderful at all, it's just painful. He looks back down at the sleeping former saint. The reality of her situation sinks in. He thinks about how she's being targeted by Oswald, a name he clearly recognizes as dangerous. He sighs, realizing how messy this situation is. He recalls what Luchel told him earlier, that she planned to leave eventually so she wouldn't be a burden to him. As he thinks this, Luchel shifts in her sleep, mumbling softly. Suddenly, Luca flinches in surprise. Luchel has unconsciously reached out and grabbed onto his finger tight while she sleeps. He looks at her hand holding his expression softening. He gently squeezes back, making a silent vow to himself that he has to protect her. The scene shifts entirely to the Magic Bureau headquarters. Outside the massive building, urgent voices can be heard calling out for Lord Cest. The scene shifts to the corridors of the Magic Bureau, where whispers fill the air. A man with messy dark hair and an earring walks through the hall while people gossip around him, wondering why Lord Cest is there. The murmurs get specific and nasty. The onlookers blame the current situation on Oswald, noting that the barrier disappeared because of the saint he brought in. Because the barrier is useless, they whisper that Lord Cest has been forced to deploy. A text box officially introduces this man as the fifth magician, Cest Rose. Oswald himself shows up, grinning and mocking the situation. He comments on what a grand production Cest is making of things. Cest keeps his cool, dryly replying that it's not like he plans on dying today or tomorrow, so there's no need for the drama. The tension spikes immediately as Oswald rudely shoulders past, telling Cest he's in the way and to move. Cest watches him go, letting out a short, annoyed huff, his eyes narrowing at the disrespect. Oswald doesn't let up. He looks back with a smug grin, commenting that for a fifth magician, Cest certainly seems to have enough free time to be slacking off in a place like this. He adds that he's envious of Cest's leisure time. Cest has had enough. He turns to the first magician and starts to speak, addressing him with a sharp, "With all due respect, Lord Oswald." Cest's expression is grim. He informs Oswald that they are departing for the monster subjugation tomorrow. He explains that what Oswald calls slacking off is actually the soldiers cherishing their final farewells before heading into danger caused by the lack of a barrier. Cest glares directly at him, his face intense. He tells Oswald that given the circumstances, he finds Oswald's comments highly questionable. Oswald snaps, screaming, "What did you say?" in pure rage at being talked back to. But before the fight can escalate, a female voice interrupts from the side, quickly agreeing with Oswald to soothe his ego. Oswald doesn't back down. Instead, he throws his arm around Cest's shoulders in a fake display of camaraderie. He sarcastically remarks that for someone like him who apparently has free time all year round, it's a true honor to be able to borrow the power of the temple's new saint. He continues his theatrical speech, waving his hand dismissively. He adds that if the magicians of the Magic Bureau were to fall, the barrier would be in serious trouble, implying he's the only thing holding it all together. Then he drops the act. Leaning in close so only Cest can hear, Oswald's expression turns sharp and menacing. He whispers that he will prove everything with his own power. Oswald walks away with his group of followers, leaving Cest behind. Cest watches him go, thinking about how obvious it is that Oswald is just sucking up to the new saint for his own gain. Left alone in the hallway, Cest grits his teeth in frustration. He curses under his breath, furious at being looked down on just because he's a fifth magician. The scene shifts to a large estate where Sarah is in the middle of a massive tantrum. She screams about how she's being blamed for everything going wrong, crying out for her father to save her. Inside, she clings to an older man, her father, and puts on a tearful act. She begs him to punish the shrine maiden who dared to be cheeky with her, insisting that with his high position, it should be an easy thing to do. She giggles to herself, confident that she's won. A dark look crosses her face as she thinks that with her father's help, that shrine maiden is finished. But her father isn't playing along. He mutters quietly, asking her what on earth she is talking about. Sarah freezes, confused by his reaction. Suddenly, her father snaps, yelling at her and asking if she has any idea what kind of critical situation they are currently in. Sarah's father isn't buying her act at all. He demands to know if she has any clue how the world is looking at her right now, and not just her. He corrects himself, yelling about how they're looking at their entire family. He's furious, clenching his fists so hard they shake. He tells her that because she became the saint, their family, the Greco family, is being treated like traitors to the country. He tells her he's honestly amazed by her stupidity. He explains that if he were to pull strings to punish a shrine maiden at a time like this, he'd lose whatever standing he has left. He screams at her, calling her a complete moron for not understanding the situation. Sarah tries to defend herself, tears welling up in her eyes. She stammers, arguing that he was the one who approved of her becoming the saint and supported it more than anyone else. Her father loses it, getting right in her face. He yells that he only supported her because she explicitly said she could fulfill the duties of a saint. He lays out the reality of the situation. The barrier is gone and the country is falling apart. He screams that everyone is blaming the Greco family as the root cause of the disaster. Sarah is stunned, whispering that it can't be true. He's done talking. He physically strikes her, sending her reeling. Sarah cries out, begging him to be gentler and insisting that she really is doing her best. He grabs a handful of her dress, shaking her violently. He shouts that if she's really trying, then she needs to prove it and put up the saint's barrier. He demands she use her own power to fix this, screaming at her to do it right now. While this chaos is happening with Sarah, the scene cuts briefly to Luca, who is sleeping peacefully. The father's rage hasn't stopped. He screams at Sarah one more time, demanding she put up the saint's barrier immediately. Sarah's father isn't finished yet. He's still screaming at her, demanding that she use her own power to fix everything. Even as the scene shifts to the closed doors of the room, his voice carries through, shouting at her to do it right now. Sarah is left clutching her arm, seething with resentment. She thinks about how both her father and Oswald are treating her like dirt now, which makes her sick considering how much they sucked up to her right until she actually became the saint. She storms out, and a maid tries to approach her with a message about a summons from the temple. Sarah completely snaps, telling the maid to shut up and yelling that she's going back to the temple even without being told. Walking down the hallway, Sarah is furious, wondering why she has to go through something like this. In her mind, she finds a target for her anger. She decides that the root cause of all her misery is the previous saint, Luca, and the shrine maidens who followed her. As far as she's concerned, it's all their fault. Just as she's thinking that she'll never forgive them, a man's voice calls out to her, addressing her as Lady Sarah. It's a young man named Dino. Sarah acknowledges him, but Dino stops dead when he looks at her, shocked by the state of her face. He asks her what happened. Sarah starts to answer, muttering that her father did it, but then she stops herself. She tells him she can't say anymore, pointing out that he is, after all, her father's guard knight. Dino, the guard knight, steps up. He looks pretty intense and tells Sarah that he's been coming to this mansion for 5 years, so in his eyes, he's practically her knight as well. He's trying to be supportive, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. Sarah pauses, looking at him for a second before glancing away. A dark, twisted smile creeps onto her face as she agrees with him, realizing she just found exactly what she needed. She turns her back to him, playing the victim perfectly. She mutters that nobody understands her, baiting the hook. Then she makes her move. She grabs the fabric of his uniform tightly and begs him, saying, "Please." Dino is completely caught off guard, blushing as he looks at her desperate grip. Sarah clings to him, looking up with teary eyes and crying out for him to help her. But while she's putting on this show of vulnerability, her internal thoughts are ice cold. She's already decided that using this guy is her ticket out of this mess. She looks up at him with those innocent eyes and suggests that if he's okay with her, he should help. As she buries her face in his chest to hide her expression, she lets out a sinister smirk. She knows she's got him. In her mind, the mask completely drops. She thinks about how her beauty is all she needs. As far as she's concerned, men are simple creatures, easy to manipulate and essentially worthless against her looks. Her thoughts turn dark and vengeful. She thinks about everyone who has looked down on her. If they're going to treat her lightly, then fine. Oswald, her father, those annoying people at the temple. She decides she doesn't care about any of them anymore. She's done playing by their rules. Meanwhile, back at the palace, chaos is breaking out. Oswald is absolutely losing it. He screams at his subordinates, shocked to hear that Sarah isn't at the temple, and demands they drag her back immediately. Back in the palace corridors, Oswald is walking alone while his subordinates scramble to get away from him. He's completely stressed out, hand over his face, fuming that things have gotten so bad he's even getting scolded by the king now. His thoughts turn to Sarah, and he looks like he's about to snap. He thinks about how she keeps leaving the temple empty all the time, completely neglecting her duties. He wonders if that woman even understands the position she's in. Unable to hold it in, Oswald punches a stone pillar and curses. He's furious, realizing that Sarah is a total defective product who can't even put up a decent barrier. He takes a breath and turns away, forcing himself to calm down. He decides it's fine, he has another plan. He raises his hand, gathering magic at his fingertips. He tells himself that all he needs to do is find Luca immediately. He casts a spell, and a flock of magical birds bursts forth from the light. He orders his creations to go out and hunt down any clues about Luca. The magical birds swarm out over the city, covering the sky. Oswald figures she hasn't left the country yet, so if he just expands his search range like this, spotting her is inevitable. A twisted, desperate look takes over his face. He grits his teeth and tells himself that for a genius like him, nothing is impossible. As the birds fly off into the distance, Oswald watches them with a smug, arrogant grin. He thinks that once he finds her, which is only a matter of time, he'll finally be able to shut up all those cheeky critics doubting him. Far away from the capital's drama, the scene shifts to the peaceful forest. By a waterfall, someone is humming a happy little tune. Far away from the capital's drama, Luchel is prepping a bath in a large wooden tub out in the forest. She dips her hand in the water to check the heat and nods. She says the temperature is perfect now, thanking the fire blessing for doing the trick. Even though it's the middle of the woods, she looks left and right, checking her surroundings just to be safe. She mutters that she's checking just in case, but she knows the truth. There isn't anyone in this forest except for Luca. Feeling secure, she gets into the tub with a splash and lets out a long sigh of relief. She relaxes in the hot water, thinking about how lucky she is. It turns out the river and lake aren't too far from Luca's house, which makes life way easier for washing up and doing laundry. She starts humming and singing a little song about how the goddess loves baths. But while she's enjoying herself, the sound of wheels rumbling over the ground starts getting closer. Luchel stops singing abruptly. She wonders what that sound is, realizing pretty quickly that it's definitely not the waterfall. Suddenly, a young man pulling a supply cart walks right into the clearing. He looks up and freezes. Luchel looks back and freezes. They lock eyes in total silence, both of their faces turning bright red. Luchel totally loses it. She points a finger at the intruder and starts yelling frantically about him seeing her while she's in the middle of a bath. Cut to the young man who is absolutely panicking. He yells out to Luca-senpai, swearing up and down that he isn't a peeping Tom. He tries to explain that he just brought the usual supply delivery like always and had no idea a person would be there. Luca comes running onto the scene, sword drawn and looking serious. He says he heard a huge scream and rushed over. He looks around, confused, and asks what's going on since he didn't hear anyone approaching the house. Luca spots the intruder and asks Aldo what on earth he's doing there. Aldo is completely flustered, trying to explain that there's supposed to be no one living here but his senior, so seeing a girl made him totally panic. Aldo keeps rambling, desperate to prove he's innocent. He insists he wasn't peeping and that it's all a big misunderstanding. He shouts that even though he might not look like much, he used to be a knight of the Silver Wing, so he'd never do something as low as peeping on a girl. Then Aldo notices something about Luca. He asks his senior if he isn't back to being human, pointing out that just last month he still had wolf ears attached. Luca tells him to shut up and asks what exactly is wrong with him. Aldo turns his attention back to the girl in the tub. He asks Luca if this person is an acquaintance and demands to know who she is. Luca awkwardly starts explaining that Aldo is the guy who always delivers packages and supplies to his place. Aldo tries to be helpful, chiming in that he even delivered the soap the young lady is currently using. From the tub, Luchel finally snaps and yells that she gets it, so that's enough talking. She screams at both of them to get out of there immediately. Luca and Aldo both panic, sweat dropping down their faces, and yell back that they understand. A bit later, Luca and Aldo are standing nervously inside the house. The door creaks open and Luchel walks in. She's fully dressed now, but she has a dark, murderous aura hanging over her. Aldo immediately bows at a 90-degree angle. He addresses her as young lady and apologizes profusely for startling her earlier. He swears to heaven, earth, and the goddess that he truly didn't think anyone but Luca lived in this forest. He explains that he heard a girl humming and thought it might be a monster like a siren, so he just checked it out of surprise. He insists that's really all it was. Aldo is absolutely crushed, head bowed low in shame. He apologizes again, promising Luchel that something like this will never happen a second time. Luca steps in looking serious. He offers his own apology to Luchel, telling her that this whole mess was actually his fault. Luchel looks at the two men bowing before her. She sighs and tells them she'll forgive them, but she adds a firm condition: there won't be a second chance. Aldo lets out a huge sigh of relief. He tells Luchel he heard from his senior that she's the one who turned Luca back into a human. He admits he was terrified thinking about what he'd do if Luca's benefactor ended up hating him. Now that the air is cleared, Aldo brightens up completely. He tells her he's really glad to be forgiven and reaches out his hand, suggesting they shake on it to make up. In the background, Luca tries to stop him, shouting out a warning. But it's too late. Luchel touches his hand and freezes. She makes a surprise sound because instead of skin, the hand feels cold, hard, and rugged, almost like touching a stone. Aldo laughs, asking if she was surprised. Luca, on the other hand, looks annoyed and asks Aldo if he's seriously still pulling that tasteless prank on people. Aldo ignores the scolding and starts sliding the glove off his fingers. He pulls the glove off completely with a clanking sound, revealing a full mechanical arm underneath. He flashes a grin and says "ta-da," like he's showing off a magic trick. Luchel asks what happened to his arm. Aldo explains casually that a long time ago, back when he was in the Night Order, he lost it while fighting a scary dragon. Aldo's expression turns serious for a moment as he recalls the incident. He admits that if Luca hadn't been there at that time, he wouldn't have just lost a hand, he would have lost his head. But the somber mood vanishes instantly. Aldo touches his chin with his mechanical fingers and beams, saying that, well, being alive is the most important thing. He straightens up to give a proper introduction. He explains that he used to be Luca's cute junior knight back in the day. But now he's retired from the Night Order and works as a humble merchant named Aldo. He leans in close to Luchil with a friendly grin, asking the young lady to treat him well. Luchil, looking a bit overwhelmed by his energy, politely replies that it's nice to meet him, calling him Aldo-san. Aldo immediately waves off the formality. He complains that he hates that stiff stuff and tells her she can just call him Aldo, no honorifics needed, and keeps nudging her to say it. Luchil feels the pressure from the energetic merchant and shoots a quick hesitant glance over at Luca, checking if it's really okay to be so casual with his friend. Luca catches her eye and chuckles softly. He apologizes, likely for his friend being so pushy, but then points out that she actually has a look on her face that says she wants to drop the formalities too. Realizing he read her mind, Luchil lets out a small giggle, her cheeks flushing slightly. She smiles warmly and decides to go for it. She tells him it's nice to meet him, purposely dropping the title and just calling him Aldo. With the ice officially broken, she completes the introduction, telling him that her name is Luchil. Aldo looks a bit surprised for a split second after the casual introduction, but he recovers instantly, flashing a smile as he addresses her as Miss Luchil and asks her to treat him well. Luchil moves the conversation forward, asking the merchant what kind of business actually brought him all the way out here today. Luca steps in to answer, explaining that Aldo is the one who always brings him the various supplies he needs to live out here. Aldo enthusiastically confirms that's the case. He gestures grandly to his delivery and tells them to take a look at today's haul. Luchil looks over at the table, which is piled high with crates of potatoes, carrots, eggs, cheese, and wine. She lets out a sound of pure impression at the sight. She picks up a tomato and comments that everything looks incredibly fresh. Luca mentions that Aldo has a really sharp eye for quality goods. Aldo grins and says that being praised by a beautiful woman puts him in a great mood. Aldo explains that stocking goods from the market is his actual job now, so this is his specialty. Luchil nods, finally understanding something that had been puzzling her. She had wondered how Luca managed to get food while isolated in the forest, and turns out Aldo has been his lifeline. Watching Aldo unpack, Luca remarks that his friend has really settled into the merchant life. Aldo admits that since he's been away from the Night Order for so long, he's starting to think he might have been better suited for this work from the very beginning. Then Aldo adds that if he'd known a girl was living here, he would have brought things she'd actually like. He offers to bring some women's clothes next time. Luca agrees that's a good idea, while Luchil just listens quietly, looking a bit thoughtful.